2, 1.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the June 11, 2026 business meeting of the Croton Harmon Union Free School District. Item 1.2 is our Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1.3 is approval of the agenda. Recommended action, be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as presented. I think we have to amend this.
We do. If we could, because of, unless that's Neil walking in, which is not, because of Neil's schedule, if we could, because he has some updates that I think we'd like to share personally, and move item 2.6 board reports down in the agenda so that it immediately precedes, immediately precedes item 8.2 polling of the board. So it's going to kind of give 8.2 and everything should work.
Yep. So moved.
Second?
No.
Well, I can move it, so.
Good. And then you
So now can move it, Allison. Seconds
second.
it.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 2.1 is the President's Report. This is our last regular scheduled meeting of the 2025-2026 school year. We are wrapping up, heading towards graduation. As a board, we are finalizing our evaluation of the superintendent, and at this meeting, we are saying goodbye to our current sitting board. I think we'll save comments for when Neil is here towards the end of the evening, but I did want to thank this board for your collaborative work. I want to thank the administration, including our Assistant Superintendent, John Griffiths. Is this your last board meeting?
My wartime.
John, I want to thank you so much for everything that you've done for our district. We were very lucky to have you,
Very lucky to be.
and I want to wish you the best in your retirement, and I hope that you are not a stranger to us going forward.
That's okay.
Because the agenda is so long, I'm just going to limit my comments to that right now. So I will wish everyone a safe and happy summer, a restorative summer, a peaceful summer, and move into item 2.2, which is hearing of the public. If anybody is here and would like to address the board, please approach the podium, state your name and address. You'll be limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Don Laird, 71 Irving Ave. I want to thank the board for their communication of the new school technology plan they released yesterday. It's great, it looks like a really great place to start, and I'm very interested to learn about the monitoring and enforcement of the policy and plan as it is now. But I really want to speak just quickly about the updates that I saw of the internet-enabled device policy. I have two concerns about the two paths that they were presented as like a false dichotomy of like path one is no change and path two seems to be purposely unrealistic. And I trust the board to find a third path and help the district create one. Thanks.
Thank you.
And we can take an
Yeah,
opportunity to clarify, just so that you know, and we are departing from convention here. So the material that you're commenting on is actually being presented to the board this evening by the district. The board has not had an opportunity to review in public or comment on that material.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Iris Bugliosi on Woodlake Drive. I was hoping Neil would be here as well because my comments are really directed towards Sarah and Neil, but for the whole board, of course. To Sarah and Neil, You served with distinction, honesty, and integrity. Thank you for your dedication to the students of this district and for your tireless commitment to serve the Croton community. I witnessed firsthand how seriously you took your oath as a BOE member to work for the betterment of every single child, every single day. You did not do it to score points with the administration, staff, or for public show. If it would support the growth of our students, is all that mattered to you. For Neil, his historical knowledge and never-ending belief in this district was quite impressive. He used policy to help shape and structure strong foundations for our students. And Sarah, from the beginning of your service, you spoke of educating the whole child. You emphasized the importance of emotional growth and support that's needed for a student to thrive. You were both always thoroughly prepared. You saw the big picture. How does this information, data, or staff hire propel this district to fulfill its mission for not just those who progress quickly through a subject, but for those that struggled as well? You understood that excellence is defined differently for each student and must be equally supported. To fulfill your fiduciary duty to the taxpayers, you appreciated that the work for a board member is to run the business in the school district by striving to provide the best staffing and resources available. You were powerful voices for this community. The district is not perfect. You welcomed criticism and you sought to build a consensus with the administration and to make change where change was needed, not just for the sake of change. I will end my words by offering words by my daughter, a proud graduate of Croton Harmon High School. She stated, "My Croton education taught me to explore things that I find interesting, like how to be intellectually curious. We had so many independent projects, and I was never required to take any specific course. I was interested in physics, so I got to take physics extra credit with class. My daughter was not valedictorian or even salutatorian here. But do you want to know something? She told me she felt more prepared for college than the other freshmen in her class at one of the top schools in our country. She learned critical thinking skills here in Croton Harmon. Our students thrived because of your work. You should be proud of your body of work. I am. Well done, and thank you."
Hi, Andrea Curie, 14 Morningside, also a former board member. And I just wanted to take this moment to appear before the board in gratitude. I wanted to say thank you to Sarah and Neil, who have given so much of their hearts and their time and their minds to this district. And I just want to also say how grateful I am to every board member at this table right now, because you're doing this for the children. I know you all are. And that is one thing that I'm very grateful for in our district. From the time I moved here many years ago, this has always been a district that honors and recognizes the incredible value that education has. And I just want to thank you for your service, and for the two, Betsy and Jake, who will be coming in. It will be a new era, but I know just from hearing them speak and all the efforts that they put in, that they are going to be on the same path of children first, children in the center of everything, every decision. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to Sarah, and I wish Neil was here. And I also wanted to give you reassurance that life can be so excellent without the school board. You'll be finding out soon. And I think you'll be kind of surprised. Thank you.
If there's no one else, I will close hearing of the public, and we will move into item 2.3, which is the superintendent's report. Turn it over to Superintendent Walker.
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to those who are here in person and those watching at home. As I think everyone who follows the school district is aware, this is a stunningly busy time of year in our system and in all systems, and really a wonderful and special time because we get a chance to kind of go from event to event, celebrating the amazing accomplishments and success of so many of our Tiger students. So I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes tonight. To Anna's point, it's a very busy agenda, but I wanted to do just kind of a quick whip around of some of the events that have occurred just in the past week and a half or so in celebrating some of our students, and then make sure the community is aware of some upcoming important events and dates within our system. So I wanted to begin with last week's athletic awards banquet. Had the opportunity, along with several administrative colleagues, to attend that evening. It's a really special moment to get a chance to bring so many of our senior Tiger student athletes together, along with their coaches and their families, to celebrate their accomplishments, their incredible commitment to our system and to representing our community on the field of play outside of the classroom over the course of what for some of them is beyond 4 years of JV and varsity participation in our system. So I want to thank Athletic Director Christine Drago, Carla, and the entire athletics team, as well as the Booster Club, Joe Barillero and Lori Zellman, everyone who's a part of making Tiger Athletics such a wonderful experience for so many of our student athletes. And it was a privilege to get a chance to be there that evening. Also, obviously the board was in attendance last week before our work session at the annual volunteer appreciation event, so I wanted to just take another moment publicly to thank Tammy Ann Trudell for her work in organizing the event, but most importantly wanted to thank all of our volunteers, the hundreds and hundreds of people who give thousands and thousands of hours of their own personal time to make the lives of other people's children better in our system. And that is, again, a remarkable gift that so many people give to make our schools the incredibly special place that they are. And so one evening's event, there's no way we can possibly encapsulate how appreciative we are for all of you and your contributions. But it was a wonderful and well-attended evening. And so we thank everyone who was there that evening. And again, thank you to Tammy Ann for putting that together. Last Friday morning, had the opportunity to attend the annual CHHS Awards Assembly. Again, in terms of developing a culture where students celebrate each other and celebrate success in all manifestations of what that means across our system. That's a really special annual event when you get a chance to bring all 500 CHHS students together with the entire faculty and staff. I want to thank Rose, our new CHHS Principal Secretary, for all of her work in organizing the event. Of course, Laura and Erica and Mark for their leadership, and all of the faculty and staff who were a part not only of giving out the awards, but more importantly of facilitating all the opportunities for all of the students who had a chance to be celebrated that morning. So again, a true and genuine privilege to get a chance to be there. We also had a chance to celebrate the members of the CHHS faculty who are retiring. And again, it was a bittersweet and poignant moment. I think we've got it captured in the upper right-hand corner of the screen there. But thank you to everyone again who was a part of that event, a really special tradition at CHHS. Earlier this week, had a chance to get some dinner at Fino's along with our Rotary Club and 4 outstanding members of the class of 2026, Jonah, Bronwyn, Arnold, and Maya, who were awarded Rotary scholarships. So I want to congratulate again them and their families and all the members of the Rotary who were a part of supporting our school district and of reading the scholarship applications. And I want to just make mention that something that struck me that evening is each year what happens is they go around the table and our 4 scholarship recipients get a chance to share their work at the high school, their contributions to the community, and what they want to do next. And I think sometimes for those of us who are around our high school kids all the time, it may become routine how impressive they are and how well spoken they are. Until you get a chance to hear their message received by folks who don't get a chance to engage with our kids all the time. And it was just fun for me to sit there and listen to our amazing kids and watch the response of the Rotarians, the members of the community, to just how incredibly articulate, well-positioned for success in life, and ready for what's next our kids are. So it was a really enjoyable evening. Again, congratulations to those 4 outstanding scholarship recipients. Also last week we had a chance, several of us from the board and the administration, to attend the CHHS alumni panel. This was originally scheduled to take place just before the winter break, but got rescheduled. And I actually think this was a really appropriate time of the year for this event to happen. And I want to thank Zohan Nadim and the rest of the counseling team at the high school for putting this together. And we had a chance to speak about this previously, but just the range of perspectives, of experiences of the graduates from, I think, 2008 up through last year. And the various panels really, I think, gave our kids a terrific perspective on when we talk about what success means in school and what it means after high school. The incredible range of experiences that our students have left our system with, and the ways they're using those experiences and skills to contribute to the world. So again, another event where it was genuinely a privilege to get a chance to be there and to experience that alongside our students. So thank you to everyone who put that together. Also wanted to make mention to several of our outstanding students who participated in the CHHS Science Research event at Somers. This is for first and second year science research students. I think there were over 850 students altogether from across the region who participated and presented research in a range of categories. We actually had 3 students receive awards, so I wanted to mention them publicly again. Vivian Chen, second place in the physics category. Ileana Harris, third place in the bioinformatics category. And Jess Katz, third place in engineering. So congratulations to them. That is a fantastic achievement, representative of the continued positive trajectory of the science research program under new leadership and facilitation from Daniel Burgo and Laura Lynch. So thank you to them for continuing to breathe new energy and life into what was already a growing program at CHHS. Also, last evening had a chance to join several members of the board and many, many members of the community at the Taste of Culture event. I want to take a moment to publicly thank Rachel and Craig Campanero from CET, who picked up the mantle from Marlena, who's done such a wonderful job with us for many years. And this just continues to be one of the gems of the system of this community on an annual basis. We were reflecting today on just some of the beautiful and poignant moments in how this event has brought together members from across the community who may not have otherwise interacted with each other, coming together, finding commonality, and the pride, again, in the adults and the students in their cultures and getting a chance to share them. All of it's just stunningly special, and one of the things that makes Croton such a unique and remarkable place. So thank you to everyone who was part of that. Again, just the food is unbelievably good, right? But more importantly, it's the people, right? The camaraderie, the coming together, the community. All of that is amazing and special. So thanks again to everyone involved, everyone who volunteered, everyone who participated, and to Rachel and Craig for making it all happen. Also, last week we had a chance, Anna and I, to join Laura at the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents valedictorian, salutatorian, celebratory achievement dinner. Congratulations again to Jeremy and to Maya, two outstanding representations of success in our schools. Special shout out that evening to Maya, who won one of 16 extremely prestigious scholarships across the entire region. So congratulations to her. And again, just a wonderful annual event to get a chance to come together with superintendents, with board presidents, with high school principals, and with tremendous scholars from across the entire Lower Hudson region to celebrate academic excellence in our schools. So it was a privilege to be there as well. Also want to make mention, give a shout out to our friends at Chef. If you haven't yet, make sure you get tickets for the upcoming fundraiser. And again, thank you so much to them. They, of course, are incredible annual and regular supporters of ours. I had a chance with Laura to meet with them very recently to talk about how we can continue to improve the process of reviewing grants and making sure that those grants continue to fund system-wide innovation. So look forward to seeing as many members of the community as can make it at this upcoming event. And wanted to close just by, of course, mentioning and making sure the community is very aware of 3 of the really special rites of passage that take place each spring in our community. Beginning, of course, with CHHS graduation on the 23rd down at Croton Point Park, PVC graduation on the 24th the following morning, and then the CET moving up, celebrating in the auditorium on the 25th at 9. Please continue to check our website and social media for further information on that. If anyone has any questions, please contact the appropriate building principal. But those are really unique and special moments in our system each year, and so we look forward to seeing our entire community there to celebrate our amazing young scholars. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to say I attended the Culture Night event last night, and Rachel, you did a fabulous job in making it a very inclusive event and very positive, so thank you. I also just wanted to bring up a thought that I don't know, because when I was walking through the rooms, I mean, families put so much effort into the stations, and I'm always thinking from an equity and access perspective. I'm wondering if there's any possibility, like, in the future, or maybe to reach out, if there could be some sort of maybe collaboration with PTA or some sort of way so that if families could like might need some funds so that they can, like, it would be a shame if any family is not stepping up to represent their culture because they're concerned that they don't have, it's a financial constraint. So I just wanted to bring that up because maybe that's something that can be thought about in the future, maybe not, but I thought it was really, really a beautifully inclusive event, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, highlighting all of those wonderful events happening right now. Item 2.4 is a report on our math performance data, and I will again turn it over to Superintendent Walker, who will provide an update on that.
Thank you again, Anna. So in follow-up to our November, December, and January presentations on English language arts achievement across the system, we wanted to make sure that we also took some time to give an overview of where our students, specifically at this moment in grades 3 through 8, have been achieving relative to math. So I wanted to begin just by providing a quick overview for the community of some terms and then where we access this data from, beginning with when we use the term proficiency, right, we're talking about students performing at level 3 or 4 on what are the mandated annual New York State assessments in mathematics as part of the required federal testing program for all students on an annual basis. So this means that students are performing either at a proficient level in terms of standards or excelling beyond that level for mathematics at their particular grade. In terms of access to the data, the raw data can be accessed publicly through the New York State Education Data Dashboard. What Ellen and the EduTech team, the data team, do so well for us then is to take all that raw data, compile it, create graphs, and then help us to do some comparisons. So that part of it isn't going to be publicly accessible off of the SED Data Dashboard. That's what we've done with the data, but the raw data themselves, the scores themselves, are all publicly accessible. And in terms of regional comparisons, certainly there are folks who are, of course, interested in how we're comparing to districts within our region. And so for purposes of tonight, we've again done that comparison relative to Putnam, Northern Westchester, BOCES, which by and large reflect the majority of the districts that we would say internally are what we would look at as comparable districts. Right? We've gotten some requests from some community members and others to say, all right, can we expand beyond the PNW BOCES region to look at all of Putnam and Westchester County? So the answer is yes, and we will, and we're in the process of it. Because again, this isn't done automatically through a system, this is manual stuff. So there are 18 districts in Putnam, Northern Westchester BOCES. There are another 32 or 33 in Southern Westchester BOCES. So our data team is going through all of that. So as soon as we have that ready, we'll share that with the community, not only for ELA, but for math as well. And just in terms of context, we don't get into specific names of districts. It's kind of one of the norms that we would agreed upon as a Putnam, Northern Westchester BOCES region. But what I would say is, in general, what we look at is we see ourselves as part of a cohort that includes Chappaqua, Briarcliff, Katona. We look at Yorktown, we look at Putnam Valley. That typically is our group that if we're somewhere in the top 6 or so, that's normally going back years and years and years where our students tend to land. There are years because there are very, very small districts with really small cohorts. Haldane, Garrison, North Salem, their scores tend to vary greatly, and there are years when their cohort of 17 students scores extremely high, and others when it doesn't. But in general, that's typically where our students have landed, just for some broad context. So we take a look at grades 3 and 4 math proficiency dating back to pre-COVID, and this has typically been the way that we've been looking at this, and up through, of course, the 24-25 school year. And obviously, 25-26 data is not available, and as soon as it is, we'll update all of that and share it with the community. Right? But you see there is a generally consistent trend. We've spent a little time looking at the 22-23 grade 3 math data. We haven't, of course, this year, but we did when it occurred. And talk to Carrie and Craig, obviously, about why that may have happened. And you'll see a couple of other places where there are some low or aberrant scores. But in general, what we try to do is make sure that we've got excellence across the board. And I think as you'll see as we get to 24-25, that becomes much more the norm. I think this is an example then in the next slide of grades 5 through 8 at PBC. Dating back to pre-COVID, you see some aberrantly low scores in certain years. What we feel good about in 24-25 obviously is not only the consistency of the proficiency levels, but also the fact that they're consistently high. Right? So we feel good about both of those things as we look at where things are trending. Grades 3 through 8, so this again is all 6 of the mandated testing grades in mathematics going back to 2018-19. You see the trend line there, generally up. And again, across grades 3 through 8 and 24-25, consistently strong with no particular cohort having an aberrantly low achieving year. And then looking at average math proficiency over time, grades 3 through 8, over the past 5 or 6 years or so, again, you see a quality increase there, but generally consistent performance year over year, which is when we think about math performance in our district, what we anticipated to see going back some years, and so I'm not overly surprised by seeing that trend. The next slide, in average math and ELA proficiency, this one was interesting, just to put both of them on the same graph and see if there was anything that was significantly different. Again, no. What we would say is that average ELA math proficiency in 3, 8, and 24-25 is the highest that it's been in the recent history in the school system, which is something, again, that our students should feel and faculty should feel great about. We like the trend, but also know that that's a place for us a foundation for us to build upon and continue to do improved work over the course of time. Looking at rankings, again, within the PNW BOCES region, that's grades 3 and 4 last year. Right? So a little lower, right, than we typically are. Again, without getting into a lot of detail, again, there are years when some districts with some really small cohorts perform very well and years when they don't. But that's somewhat low for us on a more normal basis. Grades 5 through 8, ranking in 24-25, that's typically where we live, as we know, in both ELA and math. And grades 3 through 8 overall math rankings, you see that compared to the rest of the region as well. Again, more or less where we typically reside as compared to the entire region. So I'm happy to take questions. Again, this is a broad overview. What we're thinking about, of course, next is updating this. And we're going to go back and look at both ELA and math from the entire Putnam and Westchester region, and then take a deeper dive into math regions results. We were thinking that that makes sense in the context of the broader conversation around New York Inspires. Right? So how do we help them in part of the broader conversation about what success means in schools? Because Regents exam data particularly has been such a metric for the basis of comparison within our system and others for so long, as we start to transition to a moment for all New York State schools where Regents exams no longer become the main conversation point, how do we leverage that and have a yes and conversation about Regents data and where we're heading? So we look forward to that with support from Erica, from Mark, and from John Bohanik, along with Laura, under the new administration at the high school as we move into the summer. Happy to take any initial questions that I can see. Nicole is here if there are PBC-related questions. If not, happy to field some, and then we can do some follow-up.
I guess, okay. For me, I think the question is, it's like, so we're looking at these numbers, but what does it mean? I'd like to sort of get a sense of, like, you know, what meaning we attribute to this as like in each building, honestly. It's like, what does it mean? Because you see these numbers that go down drastically, and it's not, if you sort of track them as a cohort, it's not necessarily telling a story. So is there aberration? Is it like tests are harder some year, people, like schools closed one year? I mean, we know which year that was on this chart because I think there's no data for that year because testing didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So, so I think it's helpful for us to sort of like understand when you're looking at this data, and we've asked you to look at it, of course, but the next step is like, yes, the yes and is and. So what does it tell us? And then how are we sort of interacting with that information to determine instructionally, like whether what we're doing is working. We've talked about a lot of new math sort of approaches at CET, and I don't know that, I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't catch everything, but I don't fully have a clear sense as to like what the rationale is for, for example, like math and movement, like why that versus other things that we're doing. So I guess those would be some of the questions.
Yeah, so I think broadly what we look at is when we have sort of aberrant scores, and we haven't, at least in the past year or so, what can we attribute those to? Is it a change in personnel, right? Is it, and often, frankly, it's that.
Yeah.
It's something that we look at. We have new faculty, we have faculty that are taking on a different position, we have leave replacements, those sorts of things. What's the contributing factor of student makeup and how we're apportioning kids among various classes and grades? Is it a particular class or two that's impacting the grade significantly? What we look at and feel good about is that in 24, 25, and to a certain extent 23, 24, there isn't that sort of really aberrant grade within the system. And generally, the trend is increased in terms of overall performance. And so we said, okay, when we look at it from a 30,000-foot view, we're heading in what we think is a reasonable direction. And now it's how do we get down into drilling into what are the individual classroom practices and student practices that help us to continue to improve those areas, right? What are the curricular resources? So all of those things happen on a regular basis during the year through our curriculum coordinators, our math department, conversations with our principals, conversations with Rachel about how we're supporting students with special needs in various models. But all of those things are ongoing conversations, and one of the things that we've started to do more regularly is devote time during our summer administrative retreats to looking at this data and starting to ask questions about it, and then circling back as the faculty return, and the teachers return in August and September, saying, all right, we've spent time looking at this closely. Let's start to break this down and think about it from a curriculum perspective. That's also a great strength of Laura's that I look forward to her continuing to contribute to the system more broadly now outside of the high school.
Okay. Thank you for preparing this. I think what I would like to see, as you said, this is an ongoing process, is for me, I would like to see a breakdown of 3s versus 4s, because I think particularly, I recognize that there can be a lot of reasons why, like I've indicated them before. Sometimes it's like who's in the class, both of the student instructors. Sometimes there's a shift in curriculum. It's been a hard year, all the things. But I really think having a more refined sense of proficiency versus higher achieving is important for us to know from a resource allocation perspective, and also for the students who are aspiring to go into like higher level math or STEM, for us to have a more refined sense of what's happening. The other thing that I would be interested to know that I'm not on top of, but I know that there are some years where they reset what is the baseline of what's considered proficiency or not. So to have some indication if there's other things from a curricular testing perspective that might be shifting the data that we're looking at would be helpful. And then I think as well, we saw some information earlier in the year about what's been happening at the high school. And one of the things I did like about your presentation is how you talked about the progression and how, we're looking at how students are progressing over a period of time through the curriculum and how different things are impacting their experience. So I think having a consolidated moment where we're seeing as a system what's happening in math, not just grades 3 through 8, but also what's been happening across the high school would be very helpful for us to be thinking about like curricularly, and also to do this before the budget presentations so that we can make sure that how we're spending our money is aligning to best support the students with these resources. Like, it's been very impressive to hear earlier in the year the presentations about the team collab teaching and the team teaching, so having a better sense about how these pieces may be fitting together would be, I think, beneficial.
Yeah, so some of those points. So 3s and 4s, I think, yes, absolutely something that we have done, can do, and I think you shed some light on.
And also 1s and 2s, because I think,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's helpful to know, you know, so maybe some, yeah.
Yeah, we can I mean, we have that data. It typically, you know, becomes more of an in-depth classroom-based conversation on how students are performing and how teachers are performing. But we can certainly share that with the public. In terms of the cut scores, right, that's something that SED does every year, because they look at, all right, how will these questions behave across the state, and so they do some shifting on a regular basis. And one of the things that we look at then is, over the course of time, are there huge ups and downs based on how our kids are achieving? The answer there is no. Right? But for years and years now, they've been generally on the same trajectory with some increase over the past few years, and so that lends itself to our feeling that from a resource perspective, the resources that the board and the community have allocated toward intervention services, instructional coaching, classroom supports are working, both from ELA and math, right? So that's something we can confidently say to you, that we're seeing a trajectory that lends itself toward feeling like that's the case. And so, yeah, we can absolutely follow up on all those conversations.
Can I just piggyback on that, because it's that's where I was going to go with my comments. This is very helpful to have. It kind of describes where we were and where we're going, but it doesn't tell us why. And that's the next layer that I think we've all been kind of talking about is, you know, why are the results the way they are? Are there instructional practices that are working better than others? And then just to bring it back up from a board governance perspective, it'd be helpful to know, so the averages kind of mask the nuances of the data, right? And so it'd be helpful to know if we have this data by subgroups of the student population, grade, subgroup, cohorts also exist. It then allows kind of, do we need to invest more in, or where the gaps are, right? Is it more in, do we need instructional coaching? Do we need, like, is the curriculum doing what we thought the curriculum was supposed to do? And then, like, that's the level of presentation that I think we need as a board to better inform our decision-making around budget priorities and instructional curriculum and so on and so forth. But yeah, just repeating what everybody has said already. Thanks.
I guess also maybe some looking back, like I'm looking at those 8th grade numbers from 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2022, which are in sort of like the percentages are 53 and 58%. And then, you know, 2 years later, 1 year later, I guess, they're up sort of like where I think we feel good about seeing them. So I think also it's like, you know, because again, we haven't, at least in this configuration of the board, we haven't looked at this information in this way. It would be interesting to also to be able to just sort of inform ourselves on, like, so what changed back then to, you know, again, to cause such a significant shift. I've just been thinking about the fact that, like, even now with our 8th grade math having changed to algebra for everybody, obviously algebra for all as we're calling it, you know, it's like that, like, we're going to have, it's going to be interesting to see that information after this particular school year as well, to see what the impact of that was. But I think, again, so we're all in the same place, which is, it's wonderful to see the numbers, but I think we need to have an understanding, a little bit of a deeper understanding of how it relates specifically to curricular practices.
Yeah, that's good feedback for both Laura and I and the team to hear. And so we're happy to follow up on that. I know Nicole would say, in terms of Algebra for All, we spent a good chunk of every one of our meetings this year talking about that cohort and how that cohort is achieving, how we know it, and how the teachers are adapting instructional practices to meet those needs. And so I think most recently we've heard some really good feedback from the 8th grade faculty about how that's looking. So we look forward to what the standardized data is going to tell us.
That might be a thing that, I mean, I think if you could take it back and think about it, but I think reporting on that, just because we know that there was a significant investment, and we know that our algebra teachers also took the challenge accepted very seriously in terms of their commitment to ensuring that everyone was able to rise to the occasion of being in algebra. And I know I've heard that, and the students are definitely feeling that as well this year, that they've been very well supported overall on that. So it'd be wonderful to hear a little bit more about it.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll take it back and then continue to add to it?
I just want to say this because it is something that stood out in my mind when we were hearing from Carrie at CET about some of the instructional practices that were happening there and some of the special events that were happening in certain classrooms and not in others. Like Mr. Shapiro's amazing trip to the blue page and the video that was made and how not every teacher was doing that. When I start looking at this data, these are the moments when things like that concern me. Not because of what he's doing, just because not everyone in that grade is doing that. So you could have classes that aren't having the same experience educationally, that aren't being reached the same way, that could impact learning for students across there, in that classroom across the grade.
Yeah.
I know that that wasn't, an instructional math class or anything like that, but what we've heard from parents at CET is that they would like the experience per grade in every classroom to be similar. So, and I hate to say this, but to avoid the whole we got the good teacher or we got the, when we've had these conversations, to be candid. So again, just in considering all of this and then informing the process, that's again something that I think we should consider.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation in every system, right? It's how you balance what you want in terms of teacher creativity with consistency across the system. And so we go back to how are the standards being met? Right? Are they being met? Do they have to be met in exactly the same way for each group of kids, and should they be? I think we've certainly heard that feedback, continue to hear it, are doing work around having conversations around that. But one of the things we look at is when we look section to section across a grade, is there an aberrant situation in terms of how kids regularly achieve? And so if we were to see something like that, then obviously it lends itself to further conversation around practices and consistency. Yeah. But we've definitely heard that feedback.
So, as you were just describing that, I think that it got me thinking that, a lot of the times parents are concerned that their child is A, learning, but B, in a way that makes sense for their progression throughout the year. So, I think also, I would be interested to know more, how do you do this checking? What is the, other times we've gotten presentations on teaching models and things like that, but maybe, and I don't know if other board members, agree with this, but it might be helpful to understand a little bit about, on the back end, what is the, what are the checks and balances, you as administration teachers are doing to make sure that all the sections are equitable enough, and that, how the data is being used to, make sure that all students' needs are being, being supported as best that they can. If there are certain points in the year that you're particularly looking at things, or maybe it's an ongoing process. I'm just thinking about, I know there's times as a parent you receive grades and there's a rolling thing, but then I'm better understanding, as a system, or what things do you have in place to kind of take these things into consideration?
And that, might lend itself to a work session or a series of conversations on that topic that relate to how do we think about it administratively, how do we think about it from an instructional coaching perspective, from an interventionist perspective, from a classroom grouping perspective. That could potentially be an interesting work session when I think about her board development for the fall or winter next year.
I'm just going to interject my regular pitch here. There's a lot of questions that we're asking as a board, and there's a lot of information that we want, and I just think we need to prioritize and plan, definitely put it, for lack of a better word, in the parking lot. We should definitely at some point, but there's so much that we want to take on next year. So we should definitely look at that and talk about it as a board and prioritize those things as a board. Yeah.
I would just add, one of the things obviously, as I mentioned, that we do every summer when we get together administratively, is take a look at this data and then dive deeper into it. That might be a fun activity for the entire group to engage in, board and administration, with potentially some of our faculty, if we can have them come as well. I think that's a really valuable way that we can kick off or deepen some of these conversations too. So we'll do some plans and follow-ups. Thank you.
It's your night, Steve. Because moving into agenda item 2.5, The district committee update, I will again turn it over to Superintendent Stephen Walker, who will provide an update on our district committees.
Good evening. So as the board knows, and I think hopefully the community knows, we made a shift to begin this year in how we thought about the structure and approach of our district committees. I think for the better part of probably a decade, we had fairly consistent committees, I think all of which served the district's work and direction very well. But one of the things that we've been talking about as an administrative team and as a board is how we can better leverage the committee structure to advance some more timely conversations and work related to the vision map and other more broader priorities and conversations within the system. So we changed the structure around that for this year. And obviously anytime you roll out this kind of substantial change, it's important for us to look at how did this work, right? What worked well, what do we need to improve upon. And so what I want to do is just give kind of a broad overview for the board and for the community of some of the work, some of the highlights of these committees, what at this moment the facilitators of those committees are thinking about in terms of next steps, knowing that we're going to spend time this summer looking again more closely at this and thinking about what we want the next level of work to be, obviously along with recruiting some new members of this group. So starting with an overview of the technology committee, obviously for a number of reasons we're very pleased that we made sure that this was a priority committee for the year, given that the technology conversation is certainly having an important and necessary moment, not only in our community, but across the country. And so you see a broad overview summary there. I think one of the more potentially impactful things that the committee spent some time on this year was thinking about AI guidelines and beginning to work with the policy committee on structuring what could be a policy on that really important topic. As we look to the future and next year for the technology committee, obviously implementation of the state mandated technology plan, but beyond that, more specifically refining the software evaluation process, right? How we're thinking through what ends up in front of kids in our classrooms, as well as how we're monitoring now some of the changes that have been announced as recently as yesterday with regard to what technology is going to look like in our classrooms beginning in 26, 27. How are we monitoring that? How are we getting regular feedback about how that is working? And so we look forward to the continued iteration of the technology committee. Again, as we talked about at the work session last week, in alignment with, in concert with the board's ad hoc committee on technology as well. Looking at literacy, the goal there was to begin developing a literacy framework. As I think about it, is we should be able to summarize on one page how we're teaching the youngest people in our system how to learn to read. And so that was part of the charge of that committee. They worked on developing a shared district literacy philosophy, took a look at some of our current approaches and practices and began designing that framework. That work will continue into next year, which is something we're fine with and comfortable with, because we think that definitely needs some more in-depth study through the summer and into next year with this committee. And another key part as we think about next year, I'll offer my opinion to the committee, which is we've got to be thinking about how we're aligning resources, practices, and assessment, and identifying quality assessments that allow us to find out whether or not the things that we're doing in classrooms are working across all aspects of literacy, not just one or two. And so that committee will most certainly be continuing into next year as well. Assessment and feedback, I have, I think, 3 facilitators of this in the room, so if anybody wants to join me in summarizing, but this was one of the kind of broader and really more critical long-term committees in terms of conversation about how we think about assessment and feedback within our system. That group this year developed and refined a district-wide assessment philosophy. Did some good work in gathering student perspectives from students across all levels. Spent some time looking at various research related to assessment and feedback. I think shared some of their findings through elevator pitches. And next steps, I think really now it's time to talk about how we align the work of the Assessment and Feedback Committee with the work of the Best Success Means in Schools Committee. And we knew going into it that there was significant potential overlap there. Both committees operated independently in terms of having separate meetings and separate charges for 25, 26, but I think both committees would say that for 26, 27, we need to think planfully about how to overlap the work of those two committees. In terms of what success means, this was one that I had the privilege to serve on, and I thank Laura for her great facilitation of this. That committee during the course of the year has now identified really 4 priority action areas, including thinking about and actualizing a way to engage in some parent-guardian education, panel discussion and otherwise about success, grades, and how that gets messaged, particularly to our youngest families and students. I think there was a lot of discussion among both the parents and the students on the committee about just doing this work by the time students get to high school. They've already seen school as a place where grades are the most meaningful thing. And so how do we start that conversation with students 5 and 6 years old and their families about the yes and, right? You've got this grade and what does it mean in terms of your learning and what can you do with it? So that planning is underway for an event to occur next year, as well as a couple of different surveys, one of the community about their beliefs and values related to success, grades, homework and post-secondary planning, and another surveying specifically our alumni in terms of how, now that they've left our system, how prepared they were for college, for any of their post-secondary opportunities. And so all of those things are being formulated and worked on now, and I think we'll see those surveys launched certainly by September, and then the event to take place probably later in the winter. But most certainly this committee will continue significantly into next year. The committee also did some good work in engaging with Challenge Success, as many members of the board were able to attend the evening conversation, and a facilitator from Challenge Success also led a staff-wide professional learning opportunity in March at one of our superintendent's conference days. The Athletic Advisory Committee is one that had been a standing committee and will continue to be a standing committee moving forward. The theme for them this year was connection, and really the focus was how do we improve connection between the school district's athletics and the community's various athletic groups. And so in doing so, is that a way for us to be able to increase numbers in terms of interest across the system, but particularly in modified and JV athletics? And so there were some good conversations there that we know will need to continue into next year. Obviously, one of the things that our students, I know, contributed significantly to the conversation was the importance of utilizing our varsity, our older student athletes as role models for younger potential student athletes. And so some of our events, the Tiger Showcase and otherwise, are designed to kind of create those opportunities, but how can we further that so that our students, when they're in 5th and 6th grades, just starting to think about potentially participating in athletics, can see and regularly interact with older students as role models and helping them to inspire them to become part of athletics in our system. And obviously, in terms of next steps with the transition in leadership within that department, one of the key things that I'll offer to the committee is we want to be looking at our practices and protocols related to athletics in general. What are the best practices in terms of how we should be engaging in things like how do you tell a student that they haven't made one of our teams? Right? How do we assess and evaluate and provide feedback to coaches? How do we provide feedback to our student athletes about why you're getting the playing time you're getting, how you can better contribute to the overall environment around the team? You know, there are best practices in all those regards, and so how do we identify those practices, implement them, and then use structures like the Athletic Advisory Committee to assess where we are in terms of the progress there. So that will most certainly continue into next year as well. The SELC Committee, led by Rachel, so well as always, had a couple of significant goals for this year, both of which were met. One was to introduce families to the Little Spot SEL curriculum at CET through Principal's Coffee, and that occurred, as well as the development of a comprehensive community-wide list of resources to help connect parents and students with community agencies and support. And so both of those took place this year as led by that community. And so moving forward, one of the priorities for next year will be to look at our protocols and family supports related to families and students who are experiencing school refusal. The challenge is getting young people to go to school, as well as hosting a district-wide event related to mental health and wellness.
Good for you. That's great.
I'm going to pause and say, we're going to try to keep using the word school avoidance, right? That's our term.
Okay.
School.
What did I say, school refusal?
Yeah, that's
My fault.
what I used to.
No, it's okay. I think because it's like there's been a shift, but I know from our friends at SEPTA, I think that is a term that they've reminded us. It's like it helps us sort of, right? It's avoidant. It's not like there's no finality to it. It's part of work in progress. So I'm trying to remind myself.
I provided that.
No.
Yeah,
It was
good.
you know what? It's like we're all right. We're all in it together. So I didn't know that as like a thing that I'm also working on remembering to try to change my vocabulary.
Yeah, I didn't know that, thank you.
Greg, can we change that slide? And then also want to give an update on the School Counseling Advisory Committee. This is longstanding because it's, for a number of reasons, but one, because it's required by Commissioner's regulation. And so that group met this year to conduct their annual evaluation of our program based on national best practices from the ASCA, examined best practices related to overall programming, discussed our counseling program related to its needs, its strengths, and opportunities for growth going forward. I would offer to this committee, and I'll speak more to Mark and Rachel, obviously, that going forward, I know Rachel has raised this already, some questions about the school counseling role at CET and what that can and should look like, and continuing to build on some strengths there, some potential staffing implications, as well as, I think, a deeper dive into the continuing implications of the changing college application landscape, right, and how our system needs to continue to evolve to meet the needs of students and their families who are going through this process and feeling, I think, increasingly challenged in terms of how to navigate it because of how quickly things are shifting and how, in some cases, opaque the communication is about how you go about best positioning yourself to get into the college you want to get into. Right? So we'll be continuing conversations with Mark and of course, led by Rachel, to continue to deepen that work.
As a parent who just went through this process for the first time, if you could add a component that is a financial education component to that, because to so many people I know, it was about the school that you could get into, and then they found out that they would have to go into huge amounts of debt in order to be able to go there, and then you're halfway through the process, and you're having to backpedal and look at more affordable options. So I would put my 2 cents in for that. And, I think that we should be taking kids to schools and buses and getting tours instead of, because I think it's an equity issue. I think there's a lot of cost involved in going to visit these schools, and to the extent that we could help, I think we should.
I'd say so broadly, obviously when you implement something new, again, you want to make sure that you're thinking planfully about how we assess what worked and what didn't. And one of the other things that we know is when you have this many different groups facilitated by this many different leaders, you're going to have different structures around how the committees function. And so one of the things we're going to do is, again this summer, it's going to be a busy summer, is thinking through how do we better standardize some of the experiences across the committees. Right? We've certainly heard feedback from participants across the committees about varied experiences. So it's going to be first surveying, let's get some feedback from all participants. We very much encourage the board's voice, and thank you for your participation in all of them. We want to hear from you and others about how this went for you, and then reflect on that feedback and how do we build in some protocols so that we've got, again, substantial similarity across committees in terms of how the experience should look. And then we need to recruit new energy, right? New voices, particularly on the student front, but beyond the students as well, to make sure that we've got new perspectives on this work. We obviously want to try to maintain the participants we have to the extent possible, and then add to these, and then part of that's the discussion about how do we best schedule these logistically so that folks can participate. So we've got, again, the students who are able to be there, the faculty who are able to be there, and our parents who have, of course, really complicated schedules. So trying to find that balance, and haven't quite found it yet, but are having some good conversations about how we can continue to improve that. I want to thank Greg for a second for creating our district committee's landing page, where this presentation and other committee information will live. And so thank you for putting that together. We encourage the community to regularly check that, and as we update it, we'll make sure that we share that out with the community.
Has that landing page launched already, or is it about to launch?
I think it's live now.
It is, okay, great.
Just in terms of planning for next year and thinking about adding to those committees and when do you expect that the application process or whatever the process will go out to the community to add to those committees?
One of our retreat is in late July, and so this will be a prominent topic, and so we're envisioning probably first or second week in August, probably first week in August, to get that out there, just so that we're able to be really specific with the community about, are there going to be any new committees? Are we changing anything? What are the charges? What's the thrust of the work of the committee that folks will be signing up for? And then giving folks some time as we lead into September to express interest.
You go first, and then I have a lot of questions.
You go first.
Okay. All right, well, I thank you for putting this together. I know, I will say, having been on two of the committees, I feel like I have a sense of what the two that I have participated in this year have been doing, but haven't really had as much of an eye to what's been going on in the other committees. In part because I think, it's year one, so we have not established or developed a real cadence of reporting. And I think going forward next year, I think it would behoove us to also get some sort of interim reporting somewhere through the year, so that we can sort of have a check-in to ensure that, first of all, that the goals of each committee, I think, are shared very clearly with the board, because I think that was a little bit of a gap for me in terms of my understanding of what the different committees are and what the expected outcomes were. I think we started with sort of a framework, but I think for me it would be helpful just again to hear a little bit more about sort of what are the questions being asked and what is what's coming out of it. I think we heard a lot from each other as board representatives of these committees, but that's sort of limited perspective because we're not the educators and we're in some cases not even the parents or community members who are participating. And as trustees, I think we sometimes have that responsibility of serving kind of a moderating kind of role. So I think, again, getting just some of that survey data and sharing it with us, I think would be really helpful just to hear sort of, some of the raw feedback about people's experiences. I know we have heard a lot about scheduling, of course, and that does remain a challenge. For me, one thing I'm going to just be upfront about and say here is that I'm seeing a little bit of a disconnect between sort of some of the highlights presented and what I experienced as the work. So I'd love to figure out how, where the right places to have the conversation about how to sort of true that up. And I think the other thing I will say is I'm very pleased to hear that there's going to be a discussion of how to sort of make the committee service experience more consistent, because I was really jealous of the people who had homework. I know that some of the, I know because I'm a nerd, but some of the groups did have readings and things to sort of focus on and work on to inform the work. And on other committees it was, for example, you met 2 times and it was 45 minutes and it's it's a little bit of a different experience in terms of just sort of what your participation is. And for many of us coming to this work with a deep commitment to this or that, that commitment wasn't always necessarily in alignment with what the scope of the committee was. Specifically, I think about the counseling committee. The counseling committee, as it's described here, has a very specific charge that doesn't actually reflect any of what we just talked about this evening at the table in terms of direction. So I think that would be a thing we'd want to prioritize looking into. And I know we've talked about that sort of separately as well. It just to close that, it's I'm thinking about the fact that in previous years, for example, we know that some of the work into discussing counseling at CET led to the creation of Leaders of Tomorrow, which was a wonderful outcome of things that were surfaced in that conversation. And so I think that seems to me to be a really cool model to think about what are we seeing, and then sort of how can we sort of creatively address that. I think that's sort of that was probably an unusual outcome to be able to come to that so quickly, and it required some innovative thinking and of course student voice also. But I just think that that's a great model, to think about.
Yeah, I think so. If we can talk a bit more as a team about how to get feedback to us and the facilitators of the various committees about your experience as a board, separate and apart from board, inclusive of the broader feedback from surveys of the participants more broadly. One of the things that we did as an administrative team was every time we were together this year at administrative council meetings, we did an around the table summary of where are we with each committee and what are some of the practices that we're feeling good about in terms of producing engagement. Right? I know one of the things we did was, ours was definitely a homework-based committee, right? There was a lot of reading in between.
Be on Dr. Feedback's committee next year.
But I think that one of the things that we've heard from you and others is that folks like that, right? They want someone to be thinking about in between some of the sessions. So then the process beginning this summer is how do we go from some sharing of some high-level practices to consistently applying those practices across the various committees.
Thank you. Yeah, just echoing some of what Anamika said, like for example, hearing on the, committee on what success in school means, hearing what the perspectives are. There was like some reference that you did do some sort of survey. We haven't seen those yet as a board, so like I think as it's great there's this landing page, the site, but the more that we can actually see some of these results and reports and the data that's collected would be very beneficial.
Just to be clear, we haven't.
Oh, you haven't
We haven't done the
that?
survey yet. That's one of
Okay.
the things that are in process.
Sorry, I
Yes,
misunderstood that.
We'll share that once it's done.
Okay. And I guess the other thing that I would just like to bring up is when, like, I was on the technology committee, and in terms of like looking ahead, what I don't see in this is any discussion about data, like data privacy, and I think that's like been one of the things that has been, it's like they're all intertwined, and that might have been assumed to be tucked into the words, but I think it's such an important issue to articulate that as a priority. Is an important thing. And I would just say, like, because I think it's good to hear there's going to be some reflection on like what worked well, what didn't, what could be shifted moving forward. I think there was some tension between the whole process on getting people to be part of the committee in terms of how people were selected, what that process was. So and I think, we're later going to be talking about forming an advisory committee on behalf of the district, and we're going to have to figure out the same thing as well. But making a little bit more transparent, like if you're using any evaluation criteria to choose who's on it or not, to make that a little bit more explicit, I think would be helpful. And then the other thing I would just say, like my experience being part of the committee, as well as in my own work being on a number of committees, like sometimes there's some committees where the assumption, the role is, it's more of a, hey, we've already done all of this pre-work, but we just want to run it by you. And it's like, realistically, it's about 95% baked, right? So that's one type of committee. Then there's other types of committees that you're really from a moment, like collaboratively building something. And that takes a lot more time and effort. So I think maybe, I know it was the first year of doing this, but being a little bit more clear going into this year ahead, like what is the nature of this work, like that we're trying to do here, and what is the, because it also can be hard when people think they're going to enter into a committee and they think they're really doing it, and then that's not the experience. And vice versa, when you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was going to be so much. So getting a little bit clearer about that, I think, would be helpful moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think across the system, we have committees on that reflected both of those.
Yeah.
And so some of that is reflective of the nature of the work. Some of it's the facilitators and their level of comfort with engaging around some of the conversations. And so part of our work, again, in reflecting is how do we best prepare everybody who's leading this work to be of a similar mindset in terms of this approach. Yeah, fair point.
I think this connects back to what Allison was talking about with regard to the technology committee and the like who's in it, how it's selected, but just I guess in a broader way saying that because we're setting up these ad hoc committees, I think the public might wonder like what is the difference between the ad hoc committee and the district committee, and just sort of like articulating that for the public, and also just like even if someone is not on a district committee, because there's only a finite number of people that can be on it, that there are opportunities via the ad hoc committee process, especially as we're doing the community feedback piece of it, that is another meaningful opportunity to weigh in on technology use, feels important. So sort of articulating what the differences are, but like also the like common opportunities, and also like are there moments when the committees should talk to each other to sort of be very, to be aligned, right, across both bodies? So that, where there is, I don't know, just there might be need for discussion and alignment throughout, and that might be kind of a useful thing to do.
I have a question on the technology plan. So there was wording that was part of the full spectrum of the meetings that I don't see in the latest iteration of it, and it was that technology will be used in pursuit of specific curricular objectives. That isn't in here. And again, it was there up until this later iteration. What I do see under 5, number 1, curricular integration, there's a version of that, but
Can you tell us what you're looking at? I'm sorry.
technology plan, the link that's in the
Oh, okay.
slide.
So this is the state mandated, like, compliance plan, right?
Yes.
Yes. Which is a little bit different from some of the other. This is
This is
not
the instructional
plan.
technology plan,
Right.
right?
Which is a state compliance document.
Sure, but we can still have, we have a little bit of leeway in how we implement stuff, as long as we meet the standards. Or am I wrong on that?
No, you are.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Okay. So, I think, because the way this is reading, like technology code harm is a transformative catalyst integrated through the lens of adding, enhancing, and enriching the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Great, but I think it's broad enough that it could be used in a way, or at least I'm trying to think about it from a governance perspective, in terms of being very clear with the community and the faculty around what the expectation is around the use of technology. It deviates from what we were talking about in that committee meeting. And then the next phrase of that paragraph, where we prioritize active over passive use, they're still passive. So what criteria is the teacher going to use to say, okay, this is appropriate and this is not? I think it'll help teachers in the classroom just make better decisions if we have a little more clarity around that piece in particular.
Yeah, I think, I don't disagree. I think the purpose of a document like this is compliance, and so what happens is these go through state review folks who say,
Yes,
we want
this is
this
good enough.
language instead of this language.
Mhm.
We're looking for this instead of this as we approve your plan. So the more, I think, when we look at a plan, at something like this that is about state review and meeting certain parameters, our goal is, can we create a big umbrella under which all of the necessary work needs to happen? And so the communication, more specifically about what our expectations are in classrooms, through things like yesterday's communication and otherwise, come through much more intensive conversations. This is...
So the operationalization of the technology plan isn't this?
No,
It's gonna be something-
this is a very, very broad goal.
Thank you for
But
clarifying.
I think it's important that you ask that question, Omar, because I think we received a lot of correspondence from the community after this instructional technology plan was posted. And I think one of the things that unfortunately happens is when things show up on the website, we don't always have the full sort of context for it. So I don't want to speak for Ellen. I'd really rather have, you, Steve, if you can sort of like explain this. But my understanding is that some of the language of this plan was developed actually months and months ago, because it's had to go, is that correct? It's had to go through a review process with the state. And in fact, what is here does not reflect even it doesn't reflect where we were 2 months ago in terms of how we're talking about technology, and it definitely doesn't reflect statements that were made this week, right? I mean, is that like a fair assessment of what this is?
In general, and I say this with great respect to the state.
Yep.
When you go through processes of needing to comply with certain state mandates around language, whether it's APPR, professional learning plans, technology plans, it's a substantial and lengthy review process with folks it seems as though their entire role is to review language, to look for key terms, to make sure that they're either there or not there, depending on what their priorities are. And so it is, while valuable in terms of its thought, in terms of internal discussion of the system, inherently a compliance process. So we never live and breathe by these sorts of documents. They're valuable in terms of the conversations they elicit in the system. They should provide broad vision and values for the system, but the logistics and even the approach itself changes and should. Right? We shouldn't be planning 2029 in anything, let alone technology, based on May of June of 2026.
Great. I just wanted to, because I'm trying to orient myself to, I heard what you said about the perspective on what this document actually is and how it functions. Omar, what were you looking at when you were bringing up the point about curriculum?
So in the presentation,
Okay.
there is a, am I the right one? I closed it.
It links to district
There's a
committees,
link.
which then links to the technology committee, which then links to the instructional
Correct, if you can
technology.
go back
Yeah,
to that
okay, so
technology
in that
slide.
document, yeah, I have that open.
And then 5.
Yeah,
1.
5.1.
Okay.
Right there. Critical integration.
And you know what? I should probably be on the record saying I vehemently object to device use in K through 2. It doesn't tie to the state. This is a state-addressed comment. Again, it doesn't tie to a curricular objective. If it does, wonderful. But just for the sake of like using technology for the sake of technology isn't really beneficial for our students.
So I guess that prompts the question, like, so we've done some work on what we're actually doing in terms of technologies within Croton Hartman schools, like these buildings, since this plan was put together. Is there a mechanism for providing, or is it necessary to provide a revised plan to the state that more accurately reflects where we are? Or is that like a question that we could discuss, like we could find out a little bit more about? Because I think what we're hearing is like, if we're confused, then the people in the community are also going to be confused. And maybe it's just a matter of either clarifying the positioning of the purpose of the compliance document relative to, again, information that just went out to the community yesterday that's not even reflected on the website yet, that more specifically articulates what's happening by grade level. And right, that's supposed to be a work in progress. So it's like, there's a lot of moving parts, I think, is what we're recognizing. But I think the fact that, again, these questions are coming up at this table, and because they came up in conversation, it's an opportunity for us to just clarify. Is that kind of what we're saying here? Ish?
Yes, yes, and I would just like to build on that. I mean, I hear what you're saying about, because I deal with like crazy bureaucracy doing compliance issues with the community. So I understand what you're saying about that. My concern is though, if there's not, this is though what we submitted. So if there is something that's really, for some reason, off, like this is what we're gonna be held to. So I would just like to better understand that whatever we're doing aligns enough with this so that we're good. You know, that it's not going a little bit too much like this, you know, so.
I think held to is a relative term, right, as it relates to long-term compliance plans for the state. But what we'd be happy to do is do a crosswalk between where we are now, more importantly, where we'll be in September, what this document says, and then some research into if we were to submit a revision, right, what does that mean in terms of the state's review process? And we want to have an approved plan on this, just like we want to have an approved plan on everything, without devoting an inordinate amount of time to dealing with the bureaucracy. But we're happy to do a crosswalk, and if there need to be changes, make them and then share them publicly.
So this is something that is approved through 2029?
Yeah, this is a state requirement.
Otherwise, there's no need to like submit annual or anything, it's just, got it.
Well, I'm sorry, in conclusion, want to say thank you for taking on the creation of all these committees, convening them, finding facilitators for all of them. I know that on the committees that I sat on, the materials were extensive, and I can't imagine how long it took to prepare all of them. So,
I want to thank the administrative team who did an inordinate amount of work, spent a significant amount of time thinking through to how to make these as successful as they could be in year one. Took on these challenges with energy. I have been excited about it from the beginning, and so I feel great and just terrific appreciation to each of them for their leadership on that. And I want to thank the board for making time among your busy schedules to be a part of it, as well as all of the community volunteers, the faculty, the staff, the community members, and the students who are part of it. I think what we've done foundationally in year one, while it's not perfect, not near perfect, is demonstrate that this sort of model can work, can build some momentum around good conversations in the system, And so we feel good about that in year one. Now it's on to how we make it better in year two. Thank you.
Can I echo that? Because I think it's important to say that when doing something new, it's not going to be perfect, right? And there are going to be bumps in the road, and I just want to acknowledge that and want to thank. So I was on the feedback and assessment with Nicole and technology with Ellen, and just it was a wonderful experience to go through it. And yeah, I think we're better for it as a district, and then we'll learn from this, and that year two will be better, and year three will be even better. So thank you for everybody for participating and putting it together.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really exciting to see.
So we had moved board reports into the 8th section of the agenda earlier, so we're going to skip over that, but I do want to move to amend the agenda again if at all possible. I want to move item 5.2, the tenure recommendation, before item 3.1.
I'll second that.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. So moving into item 5.2, which I guess is now the new 3.1. Recommended action be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby grants tenure to Nicole Kelly, middle school assistant principal tenure area, Pierre Van Cortlandt Middle School, effective June 26, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
If I could, it's my genuine pleasure to recommend Nicole for tenure as assistant principal at PVC. Over the past 4 years, Nicole's demonstrated a true care and devotion to the students of our district, for their families, for the team of adults that we work with, and for PVC overall. Nicole, you led with warmth, with poise, with grace, with class, with professionalism, and positivity. She's led the district's committee work on assessment and feedback, one of the many ways that Nicole has ensured that her voice and her vision help to shape not only PVC, but the work of the entire district as well. She's also a leader in our region as co-facilitator of the PNW BOCES Regional Forum for Assistant Principals, helping to mentor and support colleagues from across our area. Nicole knows the students and families at PVC tremendously well, and when we came to her this fall with really no warning and asked her to take on a new role as interim principal, her response was whatever's best for PVC. And Nicole, your response in that moment to us exemplifies who you are, a leader who puts others first, ensuring that the people around you have a chance to shine. During that time, you not only kept PVC moving forward, but helped to advance the culture of that wonderful building under your leadership. Thank you truly and sincerely, not only for the way that you stepped up for PVC this year, but for everything you've done over the past 4 years. It's my honor to recommend you for tenure.
I would just echo those sentiments, and thank you for staying here, for continuing to do. I'm emotional today because of graduation, I'm sorry. But I want to thank you for continuing to work hard for our students. And I'm very happy to vote yes for this. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
And we have the apple and all that good stuff for you too. When we all right. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, you should all not stay for the
Unless you want to. We'll watch on the web.
All right, we'll now move into the previous new business, beginning of new business, into former item 3.1, which is the update on the implementing device policy at Croton Harmon High School. And for that, I will turn it over to Dr. Dubek, who's here. Thank you.
All right, good evening. It's not up there, right? Hi, thank you for having me here tonight to share a brief update on the Internet-enabled device policy at the high school as we wrap up our first year of implementation. And I'll echo what Omar said earlier about this being the first year, and it's first year in progress for sure. So in terms of implementation and feedback, so let's just give you an overview of how we operationalize the policy. So students are required to place their phones in a cell phone box or a cell phone stadium in each classroom. They put it in at the beginning of class, pick it up at the end of class, and move to their next class. The phones remain in the box for the duration of the period, including bathroom breaks. Students have their phones during free periods and lunches. There's not a central repository during those times. And so while we encourage students not to have devices out during those times for social or other reasons, our primary focus has definitely been to ensure distraction-free classrooms, which we feel pretty successful with at this point after some revisions throughout the year. I know the policy committee specifically built in language in our district policy around use of devices for specific purposes during, in the cafeteria in particular, and we'll hear more about kind of what that looks like in practice and some challenges just in terms of adult presence and monitoring during lunch, for example, what's an appropriate educational purpose and what's not. So I also just want to note regionally in terms of implementation, the successes and struggles that we're experiencing at the high school around this policy are definitely something that are areas that are quite similar across the board in our neighboring high schools. This was actually just a topic on our principal group email thread yesterday, where many surrounding districts are, as I said, experiencing the same struggles, successes, and frustrations. And it's irrespective of whether those high schools have an off and away policy, a cell phone box policy, a yonder pouch policy. And there are a number of districts who have abandoned things like yonder pouches because they're not working for a variety of reasons. There's schools going to off and away policies that previously had cell phone boxes similar to the ones we have at the high school, and a range of other experiences. So that being said, I think everyone here in our district and the high school is on the same page in terms of making it work as best as possible and primarily committed to students staying focused in class. So on the next slide, in terms of infractions, I know Ellen had briefly shared some numbers last month, and these numbers are slightly updated due to being a month later and collecting a few more infractions in that month. And just as, again, the students have their phones during free periods and lunches since we don't have that repository. So the infractions that are up on the screen here are infractions during class time. So to date, we have confiscated 23 devices by teachers. We have had to call home to parents 4 times this year to confirm that when students don't place their cell phones in the box, they truly don't have cell phones or don't bring them to school. The purpose of doing that is to ensure that we're not bothering students in every class about why they're not putting their cell phone in the caddy. We have had 7 phones taken for an entire day or longer, and that means that students have to leave it in the office for the day because they've had multiple infractions. We've had 5 students who were directed to building admin for placing decoy phones in boxes. And just in general, kind of the consequence letter is the first warning comes from the teacher, because that's the person who is interacting with students in the classroom. After that first warning, if it happens again, it goes to an administrative referral. The first referral means that the device gets left in the office for the duration of the day. Any subsequent referrals increases the amount of time. We haven't, to date, had anybody who has gone beyond 1 multi-day stay in the office. So that's kind of, nuts and bolts of what it looks like for us. More broadly, in terms of kind of push-pull factors and the bigger conversation around this, after a year of implementation and ongoing reflection, a few things come to mind. One, just a reminder that this was a fairly abrupt change. It went sort of from an all to nothing very quickly through legislation. The law is sort of written without kind of developmental considerations by age, and even within a high school, we've thought a lot about the difference between a 9th grader starting high school and a 12th grader who is getting ready to go on to college and beyond, and there's not really any nuance in the language of the law around that. As I mentioned, we're doing a great job, I think, of implementing this in classrooms, and I think we've said this all along, but I fully agree that kind of the focus of the distraction-free classroom is the primary in all of this, and ensuring that kids are really focused on what they should be focused on in classrooms. And teachers are very much on board in that regard and monitoring. We've had a few hiccups throughout the year, as we do with any other kind of implementation. But by and large, we're in a good place in that regard. Something to keep in mind in terms of realities of implementation, hallways and lunchrooms are not monitored by teachers, and the communication when this law came out was that the device policy was not something that teachers were expected to be in charge of outside of classrooms. I know that NICED, and they actually, I think Governor Hochul also reiterated this too, that this was not meant to be a teacher enforcement situation. So given that, there's limited staffing for the few adults in the building who are not teachers to be enforcing this during free periods, and particularly lunch. So just as an example, during lunch at the high school, we have 2 lunch monitors with about 500 kids at lunch at any given time, and we have 3 administrators. So just thinking broadly, the idea of fully enforcing during the cafeteria when you have 500 kids free at lunch with 5 adults is challenging for sure, without thinking about diverting resources away from other work, right? There are other ways that you can address this, but it's a resource allocation question, I think. So, and just as kind of one background consideration, when you think about one of our goals with community lunch being slightly longer this year and having everybody all together, obviously that was done without thinking about a cell phone policy being thrust upon us. But that community lunch has become a time for groups to meet and plan when everyone's free, and that includes groups of teachers, groups of students. Admin meets with teacher teams and groups of students during this time, which has truly been one of the best parts of community lunch. So I'm just thinking about that broadly. When we think about diverting resources, I think we just have to be mindful of where those resources are coming from and what impact that could have. We also have had experience throughout the year of students honestly just leaving when we have had more restrictive implementation in the cafeteria and free periods. Because we're an open campus, students are allowed to get up and leave. And so that did happen fairly regularly, especially at the beginning of the school year when we were all new at this, and trying to be very, very on top of the devices that were in the cafeteria. And beyond that, we want our students to stay here. The cultural shift that's happened with our community lunch and our new spaces, just the number of kids that are in the building has honestly been a real cultural game changer for our school. So personally, I would hate to lose that. And probably most importantly, our students have shared with us that they feel our implementation has been respectful and that they don't have a problem putting away their devices for classes and honestly do so willingly, recognizing the positive impacts in the classroom. And I think we see that in the infraction numbers that you saw. I think in the grand scheme of things, they're pretty low for the first year of implementing the policy. And you really do not see students on phones in classrooms in our building. I know at least one of you was on a recent learning walk at the high school, and there was not a phone in sight in the classes. So outside of CHHS, obviously I won't name specific districts, but in conversation with our neighbors, discussions in some groups are around things like purchasing MacBook Neos for the entire high school in a couple of high schools in the region to kind of take the personal device aspect, the bring your own device aspect out of the hands of students and families. So the idea is they're trying to invest a pretty decent sum of money into purchasing MacBooks for students so that they can ensure that that's the only device that they're bringing into school and that it's controlled by the school district. So those are just some examples of things regionally that people are talking about in terms of putting resources in. So I think it's also really important to note, and perhaps somewhat unique at our high school compared to schools in our region, but there is a genuine culture of trust here, I think, which is evidenced by our open campus and the fact that we have very little issues with that. I think I've said this before, like I think we're actually the only high school in all of Westchester that's a fully open campus. And having worked in other schools that are quite the opposite, it's a very different feeling, the culture here. We don't have issues with students generally coming back late from lunch. It's just part of the fiber of what we do here. And I think that's a good reminder that when we give students trust and responsibility, most really do rise to the occasion. And we see that with the classroom cell phone boxes too. And then I think another factor that we've been talking about a lot recently in our implementation is that as our current elementary and early middle school students get older, our current younger students are growing up in a very different environment and a different conversation around technology, different family expectations. So we know that as those kids get older, the fight will be less in terms of having cell phones, not having cell phones. We think that many of our students are going to eventually come up to the high school with very little reliance on cell phones if the way things are trending nationally and locally continue. So there's sort of a gradual implementation approach that we've been thinking about a lot too, and recognizing that these changes are going to be coming. And I think the last bullet around shared parental and school responsibility is something that I feel personally as a parent of a child who's going into middle school and dealing with seeing friends getting phones and not, and then having worked for 17 years in high schools, I realized, because I'm learning how to do it myself, just how easy it is to shut down a phone and have absolutely no screen time or internet access whatsoever on that phone. And so it's gotten me thinking a lot about the idea of partnering and sharing responsibility with parents to help kind of encourage, learn, and support and rally around that together. Because if a student is coming to school with no internet access on their phone from 8 to 3, there's nothing for them to be tempted with to look at. So, it's not that.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
I mean, as course we can.
And it's
I will show you.
Would love that.
Yeah, it takes like 2 seconds.
I will personally do it for you.
So really?
The new iOS actually update makes it so easy to do, and if you don't have an Apple product, there's a ton of different software. I use Bark as a software for my family. I'm not a spokesperson for them. But just the idea being it is very easy to do, and I'm terrible with cell phones. So the idea of just rallying together so that it's not, this is the school's or the district's responsibility, that it's our shared responsibility because we want to do this together. So I think that's a place for us to work on. Okay, so future fit. We're in year one, we're at kind of a reflection and possible changes in decision-making point. So I see it as sort of 2 pathways that we could go down. No matter what pathway we decide, our classroom practices remain, and we remain committed to those. So for pathway 1, I think some things we can consider are advocacy with legislature to gradually make adjustments. I'm actually surprised, and maybe I just am not aware of it, that there isn't a process for feedback to legislature, some way to advocate for changes. I know something that we talk a lot about in our Principals Association, and I think the Superintendent's Association has also spoken about this, like how do we make it so that we can change the policy around lunch, specifically for high schools, and have a more developmental approach. But there doesn't seem to be an inroad there. But I think it's one that's worth finding an inroad for. I think that we also have an opportunity with the trust in our school to work with student leaders and strategically include student voice in making plans, for example, to reduce use during free periods and lunch periods. I think student voice is something that was largely left out of a lot of the conversation, not locally, I think more on a broader scale in this planning. I think it also might be an interesting time to consider more deeply the voices of current high school parents. So now that their kids have had a year of implementation, I know that we initially surveyed the entire community, but I don't think high school students were a part of it. I think it was just families that were responding at that point. So I think that might be a good exercise to see what high school parents and students think. I already mentioned the idea of partnering with parents and building a more shared responsibility, and the idea of respect again. I think after 17 years of high school kids, the more restrictive and top-down you get, the less buy-in there is, and the less likelihood that you'll find success. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. Then in Pathway 2, this is another way to look at it. You'll see considerations for operationalizing stricter policies for free period and lunch that would definitely allow for more adult oversight during those times. So I'll be honest that I think some of these considerations are worrisome in terms of school culture, but they're considerations that I think should be talked about nonetheless. So some options that we can do are to implement or assign study halls to all students, for example, grades 9 to 12. What that would mean is that no students ever have a free period. What that would mean is that you would be more guaranteed to be putting a phone in at the beginning of every single period and the end of every single period. No free periods with that wiggle room. So that's an option. I don't think our students would love it. So maybe weigh in on that, but
I don't think so.
but it's a way to control the environment to ensure that you're doing it at the beginning and the end of the period. We can consider things like adding staffing to collect cell phones. With an open campus, you'd have to think that that staffing has to be manned throughout the day, because if you have free periods at an open campus, you have to have somebody who can actually physically take them in and out throughout the day. And then there's always the option of having a single collection point and completely closing campus, which would mean operationally that students drop off their phone at the beginning of the day, it stays there till the end of the day, and there's no coming and going from campus. So all possibilities, different pathways. So hopefully that gets us a sense of kind of where we are now, what some future possibilities could look like. And I'm guessing probably through the policy committee, if there are any adjustments or changes to the policy in the future that might lead us down either of these pathways or some combination of both pathways. We're very open to it and want to be in dialogue about it.
It would be fair to say that pathway number 2 is kind of like it's like there's many iterations between pathway number 1 and pathway number 2, right? It's like you're sort of articulating the most strictly compliant scenario versus sort of like where we are now, which is, it's not even like the most loose scenario, right? So it's almost like what you're articulating as possible pathway number 1 might actually be like, like if it was on a scale of like 1 to 10, it's probably like a 3 or a 4, and pathway number 2 is really closer to like a 10 or even like an 11. Exactly. Kind of like outside of, right? Just from what we're seeing here, because I think one of the things, like as certainly for me, I'll say, and many of us here are high school parents, I think our families really value the flexibility and the trust. I think our students, Phil, you should talk first, because you're the one doing it, so you've just gone through it. What do you think?
I'm obviously going to have some bias here, but speaking as unbiased as I can, I agree strongly with the point that I think students are a lot more willing to actually focus in class and pay attention due to the current leniency. I'm going to be honest, I feel like knowing how high school students are, if there is a tighter collar put on them, especially with free periods, or even suggesting that free periods might be taken away, or open campus as a whole, or whatever that case is, I think people are going to be a lot less willing to comply in class. I think there's going to be revolting in a sense of not only just against the free periods and stuff, but then kids aren't even going to want to pay attention in class or do that in class, because I think that would be impeding upon something we've practiced here for so long with free periods and having the flexibility and, as Dr. Duback was saying, the trust of having an open campus. But I understand the alternative perspective, but I think there has to be a sort of middle ground, because I think it's extremely unrealistic, the idea of removing something like free periods or something like that without expecting students to then act out against that. The way it is right now, I think there's a decent balance between how students are now focused in class and willing to focus in class due to the current balance. That's what I think.
I mean, but to be fair, right, like this possible pathway too, there is a portion of our community that is asking for this. There is a portion of our community that gets very excited by children lining up and clicking yonder pouches at the beginning of the day, regardless of whether they're 18 as seniors. There is a portion of our community that is literally asking for pathway too.
But yeah, I was also gonna say, I just feel like it's kind of crazy that, like, especially for, at least for the seniors, like, we're genuinely about to be going off to college. Like, we're gonna be 18 years old. We're not even gonna be, like, under any sort of parental supervision for most of the students. So I think, like, the fact that it's gonna be, like, you're trying to implement something where it's like, okay, these 18-year-old legal adults are gonna have to have their phones locked away all day because we don't trust them to have the discipline of not looking at it wherever. Like, I just think that's just an almost like a unfair standard to have, especially considering you then want us in like 3 months from now to go off and like act as adults, and you can't trust us with a phone. I just feel like the standards aren't really aligning there.
I think that speaks to, sorry, before everyone goes, I think that speaks to exactly what Dr. Duback was talking about, which is that when this mandate came down, there just was like no conversation about what's developmentally appropriate, and the fact that it is so sort of across the board, I think that is definitely a challenge. And to your point, Dr. Duback, about sort of like the advocacy, it is weird that like that there was like one survey that was done by the state education department. I don't know that those survey results were widely shared, but it's like it doesn't seem to have impacted the conversation just in terms of like, you know, we don't have like a clear picture of this. So I think those are all the points. Sorry, now I know you're about to ask something.
No, just a couple of observations. I think what Philomena said is very important to consider. There are members of the community who would like to see what I will call an absolute cell phone ban. Looking at certain research on the subject of what is the purported, because I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, detrimental effect of the overuse of cell phones by individuals at various stages of childhood and early young adulthood. But in considering what is appropriate for our district, our community, and what I mean by that, our school community, I think it is important not to be swayed by some concern about the what would be kind of the best in some people's minds, but what is the best for the district and for the students. And I think one of the points that is contained in the push-pull factors that are mentioned is, that were mentioned in your presentation, Dr. Duback, is in particular, what are we trying to do? And if what we are trying to do is make sure that students are not primarily distracted when they should be focused on being involved in education, that is no different than we would expect of anybody else. And if you are an adult, you don't have your phone taken away at 8 o'clock in the morning when you start work and have it given back to you when you leave work. You are treated as an adult, and I think particularly when we get to the high school level, as more so juniors and seniors, as you had said, there is a culture of respect that we provide to our students in so many other ways that we should not abandon that when we are talking about this issue. I would add that the resource question that you mentioned is very important, because when you are talking about a confiscation at the beginning of the day and a return at the end of the day, you're talking about resources, you're talking about time. You have 500 students who will be coming into the building at 8 o'clock in the morning, more or less. Okay? You have to have them line up. I will remind those folks, and I know Dr. Duback, you remember this, when we had to do the testing, because people were coming back from, after COVID, and how long it took to get people into the building. And if you're talking about students going to their after-school activities, whether it's athletics or club or work, what happens with all of that? There's a whole lot of ramifications that an absolutist position will make the district have to deal with in ways that are not thought about. So for a lot of reasons, yes, I agree that, there's perhaps some ways between pathway 1 and pathway 2, but that should be done, in my opinion, with the recognition that what we are trying to do is best for students and the community rather than for something that perhaps I would consider perhaps even ideological. That's my 2 cents on this question.
I'm really struggling with this topic because I see both sides to it. I have an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old, so I'm deep in the thick of this, but now in the college level, I teach college, so I'm just dealing with students in the classroom and stuff, and I totally understand exactly, Philomena, what you were talking about, buy-in and respect for students and cultural respect. I guess, but I'm also struggling with is that we are adults, and we do know that some of the technology, it's not just the technology, the apps that are being used are designed to be addictive and have had, real social emotional implications for children, for teenagers, and even adults. And it can be a real accelerant in terms of creating, social drama, problems, disciplinary issues, having that available. So I guess I just want to put on the record that I see both sides, and I find it, complicated. Pathway 2 seems like a little draconian, like without a doubt. And I do hear, yes, you are about to go to college, and you do need these moments to stretch and to practice self-regulation with these devices, but it's also really hard when there's these technologies that are designed to make it hard for a person, any person, to self-regulate. As adults, we find it difficult enough. So, so I just wanted to say, I put that on record. That, I hear what you're saying, Neil, but I don't totally agree with it, but I see why this is a really hard thing to do. I guess, to me, some of the things maybe to, build this out in terms of thinking about this issue holistically. I mean, right now it's focused on the confiscation of phones, right? And the resource allocation. Yes, that's a challenge. But I think also, the more that we as a district are providing students with an understanding of what are these technologies, how are they designed, the ethical implications of the data privacy, and also just the benefits of, in-person awkward weirdness of during those lunch times when it's easier to just go onto your phone and not, I think those might be things to create more of a holistic environment so students are supported, and maybe a little bit more incremental. What's appropriate for a 9th grader may not be exactly the same thing that's appropriate for a senior.
Like, for example, 9th graders next year generally aren't going to be assigned to study hall. They're not going to have free periods. And that's an adaptation that you all are making for next year to address the fact that that the flexibility needs to be age appropriate. And I think it's important to point that out, just because not everybody in the community may know that that's a significant shift that the high school is making that's really responsive to what you all were seeing, which is, we need to have a little bit more structure for these people who were just 8th graders a hot second ago, right?
I agree with Anama's point. Also, I think, just to be very clear, I completely acknowledge and understand that technology is obviously addictive. I mean, any form of it, specifically cellular devices, but also any form of computer and really any form of media. I completely agree with that point, and I'm not an advocate for people sitting on their phones during lunch and playing video games, but I think that in reality, the case, as someone who is, it's now about to graduate, but has been in the high school for the past 4 years, a strong majority of the students aren't sitting on their phones and just staring at their phones the whole time. If me or my friends are ever using our phone just to like, if we're having if someone's in a heated argument, they're like, oh, that's not true, then we look it up, something like that. And I just feel like, in terms of also like keeping campuses open and stuff, and also I just think that like technology is so addictive, and like it's extremely unfortunate that this is the world we're in, but this is the world that we're in, and I think like a lot of the things you're describing, like as someone who's like experienced like things on like happening on technology where it's like obviously like, not like cyberbullying but something in that realm, like that's never happened. I think at least I can speak personally to me and my friends, that doesn't happen on a school campus. Like that's something that happens outside of school, and that sort of regulation needs to be happening from like the families and stuff. And I just think that a lot of the parents that are arguing against this are just not fans of technology as a whole for their child. We're less than like not about technology being used really from a passing period, because those things that are happening that are so extremely negative like aren't, and again the off cases, but aren't usually going to be happening like in your passing period or like, you know, something like that. And I just think I think it's partially fear mongering also.
But I think what you're talking about, Phil, is you're alluding to this, like one of the bullets here about the gradual changes as our elementary students get older, right? And I think that's also sort of a little bit of what Allison's talking about, which is if we're sort of like a couple of easy ways to sort of like address this, like as we're starting to think about what do we want to see in year 2, it sounds like, you know, like the most strict draconian thing is not where anyone really at this table seems to be. No one seems to be asking for that. But I think like a little bit more communication around sort of like the benefits. And Phil, you've identified it really the best for us, I think, when you talked about how sort of like freeing it was to like not even have to think about your phone because it's like it's gone, and that allowed you to have that focus. I think students are really feeling that way. I think they are, just, you know, from my observation, it is true that the majority of people who are at Common Lunch are actually interacting with each other. And so what we think about is like, what are the ways that we can support that in the culture? Like, we just, I don't know, like in our like West Pet like newsletter that we got today, there was an article about a school district in Washington State. I don't know if people saw this. It was like in some, you know, I don't remember what the publication was, but basically it's like making like literally like board games and like interactive things. It's like just having that stuff sort of like around and about, because it's like if it's there, maybe you're like, oh, you know what, it is actually interesting. And I think again also about people who are in the middle school right now, because this has been so much a part of the conversation just in the past year. I'm fairly confident that the people who are rising up as 8th graders, first of all, many more of them have waited until 8th. They do not actually have phones yet, right? That's like a significant change from when Phil was an 8th grader. I think it's like the numbers have reduced. So those kids are gonna come up into the high school with a different perspective. And part of our thinking in, you know, sort of putting together this policy, which I think we all had a lot of feelings about, was that there is a hope that like as the culture changes, a lot of the stuff is gonna feel smoother. I think the other thing, just in terms of having been in high school, there's some realities. Like as we know, you know, people come in and like do a presentation. We've seen people come in and present to our high school students, and they're sort of like, well, here's the QR code, and you're like, am I supposed to like hold my laptop up to that and take a picture to like, you know, to do the exit ticket or to fill out the survey? So it requires also adults who are entering that sphere to sort of change their thinking. The other day when we did the alumni panels, there was an opportunity sort of to be like, give us your feedback. And reflexively, there is still a little bit of a culture of like, go into your backpack. And that's what they did. They went into their backpacks, they took out their phones to do it rather than using the laptop. So there again, it just becomes the like, what are the things as educators and administrators we can do to be more proactively prepared, to be like, actually, you don't need to scan, just go into your Google Classroom, the thing is there, and sort of prioritize. You know, it's going to be annoying to take out the laptop and do it, but those are the types of like holistic shifts I think you're talking about that may sort of minimize some of this and sort of allow us to not have to legislate it. I think the other question though about sort of like the staffing, I think it is sort of like an important thing for us to sort of talk about is like, if we don't want people sort of spending their time focusing on it, how can we also sort of like message what we value as a community, which is we value community lunch. Like this is something that's really important to us culturally in our high school. So if it's accurate, Laura, that you were saying that when enforcement was stricter, folks were going off campus, even though like, we also heard that people were staying on campus, so it's a little bit of like, you know, trying to sort of like dig down into like what actually is happening. I think there again, it's an opportunity to sort of like celebrate like the things that make it special, so that becomes the alternative you want to choose, right? That's, I mean, again, I think that's going to be easier for young students coming up because they're going to have already chosen that alternative through their families. So I do see this as like something that's going to be minimized sort of like naturally. But I think if there's a question, we do need to think about this summer, if there's tightening up that we need to do, or, you know, what we want to see.
I mean, there's a bullet point on here in Pathway 1 that's working with student leaders and including student voice to create a plan. I really like that because I think that, you know, students, and this goes to sort of like do you want to have the, like, you know, the strict control or not? Like, really students listen to their peers, right? And so it feels to me like having student leaders sort of like influencing their peers around not only like the use of cell phones, but also like we were speaking about the like dangers of social media, et cetera, like that could be a really valuable way to sort of raise awareness and potentially, you know, we were in the presentation around our high school leaders going into elementary schools. You can envision something that's like that, where, you know, high school students start talking to middle school students about, hey, you're so excited about these cell phones, but these are the kind of crappy things about them, right, as well, that like, I think even our own students, especially older high school students, are starting to recognize and are actually like very conscious of, right, like they get the pretty bad effects of social media, of a lot of different technology. So I think that I like that bullet and sort of like focusing in on student leaders and how they can play a pretty active role is great.
I just want to add one additional component, because I see this playing out in my own family. Like, my 7th grader has never brought a phone to school. So she's, in 2 years, potentially going to be at the high school with the ability to be able to bring her phone to school. And I think there is going to be a point of education that's going to be required there.
Yes.
Because it's a shift, right? Like, we dealt with the opposite this year. We dealt with kids who were used to bringing phones to school all the time, and we kind of took them back. But you're going to have the opposite problem, because they will not know what it is to be at school with a phone.
So I think everybody raised some very good points, and part of my statement before was really to address those absolutist folks.
Yeah.
I think I would add that when within the time constraints that we had to develop a policy, we did try to include student voice as much as we could, but a lot of that work was done during the summer when students were.
I know you met with Philomena.
We did.
Yeah.
But I think as the board looks at how the policy may be tweaked, changed, that, you know, involving student voice even more would be very beneficial. Also, I'm thinking that with regard to our requirement to establish and put in place a digital fluency, basically curriculum, if I can call it that, that is something where a lot of the issues that Philomena talked about in terms of the addictiveness, and you did as well as Theo, should be brought out, you know, in all grades. And that's part of what I believe is looked at in those standards that the Board of Regents has and SED has set out. So that we really should be working on that to make our students more knowledgeable and more attuned to what the bad stuff that they may be thrown at them. So I think it's a process, and it sounds like we can have confidence that you all will be working on that.
I love the idea of collaborating with parents and educating them in terms of how they can shut the phones down and take away internet access remotely.
But you know what also I was thinking about is like it also is requiring like that shift, and I will speak for myself, like when the cell phone was really more prevalent, like you might reach out to your child and be like, hey, remember you have a doctor's appointment at 2 o'clock, or like whatever. And so even for me this year, I've had to train myself to remember like, all right, I don't text this person during the day because I don't even want to give them a reason for having to like wonder what's going on. So I think beyond just like the controls, it's also, again, it goes back to, especially for parents of high schoolers, just to, you know, it's like we've lived in a different way, and now we're also starting to sort of have to recalibrate that. So it's part of, you're 100% right, it's just part of like rethinking all this.
Well, I remember of my first year on the board being at SFC meetings, and the conversation was actually about how students were getting text messages from their parents because parents were, or not, it wasn't parents, is it?
Infinite Campus.
It was updating grades, and then the parents would text the students, and the students were talking about how, because the shift was then to turn the notifications off until after school day.
Right.
Yeah, like that's how much it's shifted.
Yeah.
And I will say there's been a big change in that regard. We don't have as much of that anymore with the cell phone policy in place for sure. So that's been a positive, definitely a positive change. The other thing, I know parents are sometimes worried about emergencies too. So even when you shut off your internet, you can make mom and dad an emergency contact when your internet is off. Like again, it's not an absolutist kind of thing when we talk about partnering.
That's great. I think this was really useful, and I really appreciate the frankness with which we've talked about all this here, just because it's sort of like demystified things, and I think also made it very clear. It's like this is where we are, this is what we're struggling with, and it sounds like it's a regional, not struggle, but it's like a regional conversation that everyone's trying to address. And I think it's important for us to remember that it's like we want to do it in a way that supports students, as you said, and also that doesn't require like an investment in things that we may have to, you know, like the idea of like buying like MacBook Neos for everybody. That's like that's different. Yeah, I mean it's a lot of money, and you know it's like it's going to introduce like a whole other slew of issues.
So they would also find a way around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, thank you. I think
Thank
it's
you
really
for this.
helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are you glad I didn't do a long president's report now? So returning to our agenda, moving into 4.1, ad hoc committee on technology. Recommended action, be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby establishes an ad hoc committee to determine the scope and charge for engagement with the community of a community advisory committee on technology. This committee will consist of 3 members of the board to be appointed by the board president. The committee will report its recommendations to the Board of Education no later than September 3rd, 2026.
So moved.
Second?
On the question, does Board Development want to talk about this?
We do actually. So board development met this week, and we recapped a lot of what we talked about here. So based off of that discussion, we just wanted to highlight a couple of points. It was important to us to make sure that the formation of this committee centered the idea that community engagement is the job of this ad hoc committee to determine what the next thing is going to be. That was basically the takeaway from our work session discussion about this last week. The other thing that I want to highlight is, you know, your eyebrow may have raised when you saw the words no later than September 3rd, 2026, because what that means is this ad hoc committee is going to be charged to work over the summer. But because we have acknowledged amongst ourselves that there's urgency to this, and because we've heard also from our community that we want to sort of get this community engagement going, we recognize there's, you know, not going to be able to reach everybody in the summer, but this puts us on a cadence that that allows us, or actually forces us to prioritize the work, because we'll have to report back to the full board on September 3rd. The other thing that board development we discussed, we wanted to clarify, is that we are looking at this ad hoc committee as sort of the fact-finding, and we are going to, of course, engage in conversation with the district and with Dr. Moskowitz specifically to ensure that what we're doing works and sort of dovetails with the district, the work of the district committees. I think there's enough to bite off here that like there's going to be opportunity for these things to sort of operate in tandem, and I think as we see what comes out of those conversations, we'll ensure that they are not conflicting with each other and actually ultimately supporting the work. You know, that each committee will support the work of the other. If it turns out that that's not going to happen, or that's not the way it's going, we'll be reporting to this board, that committee will be reporting to the board regularly, so we'll see that and we'll be able to address it. Do other folks have questions?
No, it just seems to me that since what the purpose of this ad hoc committee is to establish the scope and the charge of the community advisory committee, at which members of the community and board members and whoever else is going to be placed on that committee, that charge of the ad hoc committee is relatively limited. The factual work is to make sure that the charge and the scope are not overlapping or inconsistent or leaving out things that are properly within the board's purview, so that the community committee that is established based on that recommendation will then do the work that the board wants done, so that the board has its information to go forward. So I don't think it's a long-term project, and I think it certainly should be doable, in 2 months or so that, has been established.
So in the past, members who were interested in doing that should email the board president. So I would say, because there will be a shift in the board in the meantime, that if members who are going off want to be considered, they would be considered and appointed to the committee, potentially until the end of their tenure, and then we would have to reappoint or replace those positions after July 1.
I'm not sure it's realistic for this committee to meet before July 1st, just truthfully. That's one of the things that we talked about in board development. We proposed amongst ourselves, if the board agrees, that if this resolution passes, that people could either write to you directly to say that they're interested, or that we use our committee interest form. But this is one of those committees that people could express interest in.
But we're not really meeting, our reorganization meeting isn't until the 12th, is that the
16th of July.
16th, so that leaves 6 weeks.
No, it's like a month. It's like a month and a few days.
No, that
No,
leaves
it's
6
6
weeks
weeks until
in the
September.
summer.
No, that's
I'm
true.
actually, I like that idea though.
Why would you not just start the work
Yeah, if we
now?
can start the work now.
Hey, listen, you guys have a lot more time. Sign up. I think we can absolutely do it.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if there's no,
Yeah, but
and if it turns out not to be that either one of you are interested in doing that, then it'll be the work of whoever is
Yeah,
volunteering
I-
for
that's-
it.
that's fine.
Let me suggest one other thing to keep in mind. As of July 1st, the new board members may be sworn in, even before the reorg meeting.
Right, but that's
And then-
not usually our.
No, and we have done that in some years past for reasons
16th to start.
like, so my point is that the board can either say, 3 of us, including Sarah and me if we desire, can do this until June 30th, and if one of the 2 new board members, or 2, want to step in for this purpose, you can have them start in early July, or you can have them start on July 16th, or after July 16th. You just, it's,
Yeah.
you all
Okay,
decision.
So if you're interested, please email me.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 4.2. Recommended action, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby establishes an ad hoc committee to examine policy 9230, recruiting and hiring and related best practices. This committee will consist of 3 members of the board to be appointed by the board president. The committee will report its recommendations to the Board of Trustees no later than December 31st, 2026.
So,
Second?
On the question,
So here again, board development discussed this earlier in the week, and how can I say this? It's like, so we determined that again to help the committee understand that this work is time sensitive and could potentially result in a referral to the policy committee or other referrals to the board, that we wanted to sort of lay out a timeline that again allows the board committee to prioritize the work, hence the December 31st proposed deadline. Of course, an ad hoc committee, if its work is not done, can come back to the board and say our work is not done and we need more time. The goal with starting with the policy is that is actually where this question for many of us started. So that is right now the key part of the charge, but related best practices, I think, gives us the latitude to determine what else might need to be explored to fully revisit the policy. Does that sort of cover what we talked about? Okay, so that's the answer to the question.
all in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. And again, if you are interested in serving on that committee, please email me.
Just on that, I would assume that committee is going to report by the end of December. You're not expecting that to start before July.
I don't expect that committee to
Right,
start
so
before then.
so that would be the 7 board members as of July that will be able to sign up for that. That's fine.
Okay, moving into instructional personnel, item 5.1. Recommended action be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby appoints Catherine Morris as a 1.0 FTE Library Media Specialist, Library Media Specialist tenure area at the Pierre Van Cortlandt Middle School at a salary of $67,941, BA plus 30, step 1. Ms. Morse is appointed to a 4-year probationary term as a Library Media Specialist, commencing on August 26, 2026, and probationary term ending on August 25th, 2030 in the tenure area of Library Media Specialist. Ms. Morse has internship certification as a Library Media Specialist with provisional certification anticipated in May of 2026.
In May 2026, meaning the last month?
Yeah, so it's not anticipated anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
It hasn't popped into Teach, so we just can't confirm.
What's that?
Her certification has not populated into the Teach system, so it just can't be confirmed at this time.
Okay. I mean, can it be confirmed by asking the candidate, have you got it?
She has intern certification.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, with provisional certification anticipated in May 2026. I'm just asking before we vote on this, since it's now June 2026, has the question been posed of the candidate? So, do you have it, notwithstanding it may not have been populated into the system?
No,
I've not posed that question to her, but we don't typically do that, and we rely on what's reported.
Okay, so this,
She's operating under an internship certificate, which isn't uncommon for young people in this circumstance.
okay. I will move it.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 5.3, recommended action be resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the professional development advisor appointments for the 2025-2026 school year as presented, and that is for Jennifer Moore, as a co-facilitator of Critical Friends, and Tanya Thibodeau is a district-wide virtual learning coordinator, VHS program that's so used by high school students.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Moving into our donations. Item 6.1, recommended action be it resolved, the Board of Education gratefully accepts the donation of $500 from the Croton River Artisans Gallery as a contribution towards the Croton River Artisans Gallery Scholarship for 2026 at Croton Harmon High School to be awarded to a graduating senior who is pursuing arts as a major or who has taken an AP art course at CHUFSD.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
I had a question. Is this a donation that's coming through then for an award that would have already been given for this year? It's just the funding for it? Because this is 2026, so I just wasn't sure. It's not for 2027, so it's for...
It's just the money to...
Right, it's just funding an award that was already presumably awarded?
It will be awarded.
Oh, it will be awarded for next year. Okay, got it.
So it will be awarded for 2026. It hasn't been awarded yet.
Yeah.
So this
I'm
is,
confused.
so we have already approved the establishment of this scholarship.
Yes.
We are now receiving the donation to fund the scholarship, and the scholarship will be awarded at the senior award ceremony on June 22nd.
Okay, got it. Sorry, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 6.2, recommended action be it resolved, the Board of Education gratefully accepts the donation of $1,500, $500 for each of 3 awards from Robert and Sarah Mills Cohen as a contribution towards the Cohen Family Awards for 2026 at the Croton Harmon High School. And 3 separate awards would go to a student who demonstrates contributions to the music program, a graduating student who has made a significant contribution to Croton Harmon High School Theater, and a graduating student with outstanding writing ability through their time at CHHS.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
I would just say that to the Cohen family, Robert and Sarah Mills Cohen, have been long-time supporters of our district, and I personally am very grateful that even after their children have long since graduated, they are still committed to helping students with scholarships in these areas.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 6.3, recommended action be resolved, the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation of $4,800 from the Croton Harmony Booster Club as a contribution to the Booster Club scholarships, 4 individual scholarships of $500 each, the Len Gober Scholarship, a $1,000 scholarship, the Mary Brooks Scholarship, a $1,000 scholarship, the William Billy Shea Scholarship, a $300 scholarship, and the Steve Iggy Aguado Scholarship, a $500 health scholarship at Croton Harmon High School. These various awards would be given to students who excel in athletics and sportsmanship, to a student who exemplifies a warm and caring attitude towards others, as well as outstanding sportsmanship, a senior student who has demonstrated outstanding dedication in a scholastic sport, a senior who has demonstrated commitment to or actual work on behalf of the environment, and a senior who has provided exceptional support to athletic teams and their success.
So moved.
Second.
On the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 6.4, recommended action be resolved, the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation of $2,000 from the Croton Harmon Booster Club as a contribution to the bike shed at Carrie E. Tompkins Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
One question is, do we know where this bike shed will be erected?
We sure do.
Okay, where will it
It's
be?
going to go right next to the other shed.
So remind me, because I just don't remember. Where's the other shed?
That's right.
Where's the other
Up
shed?
by the basketball court.
Oh, okay, up there.
So that's where the new bike course has been
Yeah.
started to be painted, as Sarah and I saw when we went to the bike rodeo a couple weeks ago, and
Okay.
they're gonna have a great time there.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 6.5, recommended action be it resolved, the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $100 from the Women's Club of Peekskill and Cortland, Inc. as a contribution to the Women's Club of Peekskill and Cortland Scholarship 2026 at Croton Harmon High School to be awarded to a graduating senior student who is in the top 3 to 5% of the senior class.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Moving into items, the consent agenda. Item 7.1, recommended action be resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves all of the items under the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, for item 7.13, Denise, could you, or Ellen, in reading the agreement, there are a couple of spots, and I can't find one of them, but it's around data privacy. It says that after the agreement is executed, they'll provide some certifications or some more information about their data privacy. Forgive me for not bringing this up earlier in the week. I just saw this. And that it says they'll submit a plan after execution of the contract for how they'll comply with state, federal, and local data security privacy contract requirements. I'm assuming we have to approve this for it to take effect by July 1st. But when you get that information, can you share it with the board so we can just make sure that it's in compliance?
So,
These are renewal contracts, right? Or
yes, this is the final year of this RFP award. So Ellen has already started the process for next year's RFP, which we're looking to move forward in October, November of next year. But so to your question, what exactly are they providing post-execution of the contract in regard to data privacy?
What they're saying in the contract is the plan that outlines how they comply with state, federal, and local data security and privacy requirements. I'm sure it's
Got it.
boilerplate, but just
It's just an
make sure we do
interesting way
our
to-
governance responsibilities, make sure that's it. Yeah.
It's an interesting way to do it, like sign and then we'll tell you.
And then
we're
we're, yeah.
Well, that's why I was wondering if it's because, like, is this like some sort of different provision because it's like a contract renewal or something? I don't know, that's what
We
I was
can
thinking.
If we already have it, it's great.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it'll be good to have it from the vendor,
Absolutely.
particularly with an RFP going out next year.
Yeah.
So just one quick question here, just because I think I was a little bit confused about this. For the parent member of the Committee on Special Education, it's listed as for being for this past year. Is it like for the remainder of this year?
Yes,
Okay,
she
got
just
it.
completed training.
Yes, that's what we heard. So
captured her.
is there a chance that she might then be able to continue
Yes.
on for next year?
I will reappoint,
You'll have to
we'll
reappoint.
present for
Okay.
reappointment July 16th.
Great. Well, I think there was significant excitement in the community to have such a good community partner in this role. So I was wondering if it was like the time was almost up, or if there's a possibility.
You want to catch it?
Yeah,
I will
wonderful.
continue with it.
That's great news.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
would say you wouldn't go through all the training in June and then say, I'm not doing it next year, that's why, so.
That's why I was asking you.
I'm sure that was the answer.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. We will now move into our close of the meeting and our second hearing of the public. Unless Jimmy wants to get up and say something. We will not go through the hearing of the public. We will then, did you want to do polling of the board or board reports first?
Report reports first.
Okay. 2.6, okay, so moving into board reports, advocacy.
Yes, right, so advocacy doesn't really have an update from our last meeting. We're looking to schedule a final meeting and again, progress and working on some resolutions for next month.
We're meeting Monday, I want to say it's the 29th. At 1 p.m., yes, it's on the calendar. Virtually, for me.
Well, for you, yes. Board development?
So board development met on Tuesday and we had a very robust meeting. Actually, it was quite long. We went through a lot. We reviewed several administrative items, most of the information about which has been shared with the board in terms of timelines for the superintendent evaluation and other such things. You all have been copied on and received today the application materials for our 2 new student ex officio positions. So board development's charge to you all is to please review those applications as soon as possible over the next day or 2, because in order to complete the interview process, we would like to begin to schedule candidate interviews next week. After having consulted with our legal counsel, it has been determined that the best way for us to do this is actually to have small interview committees. I think that that's also, as Anna suggested, going to be a thing that allows for like a nice intimate conversation with each candidate in a comfortable setting. So we will be reaching out to folks who are interested on the board in participating in those candidate interviews. They're going to be scheduled most likely for sometime next week. It is, as Sarah reminded me, still a very busy week in terms of exams and regents. And Dr. Dubak also pointed out the same, that everyone's got a lot going on in their schedules. So our main priority is going to be to offer up times that allows them to opt in. And if folks need to have special timing, since we all live here in Croton together, we can figure out something that works over the weekend or later in the week or whatever as needed. In terms of that, you'll receive a request from board development along with a couple other requests. I know you have a question, so let me just say what the other two requests are. We are also going to be beginning working on our board self-evaluation now that we've completed some of our other evaluation work. So that will be coming to you over email. It is basically going to be a duplicate of what we did last year, which was the NISBA form and some specific questions about our goals. It's all online, and our thinking is that it shouldn't take you more than an hour to complete. I mean, that would be max in my opinion. The last piece of it is that we would still like to try to find a time for this board to come together just to sort of talk about our practices this year and sort of have a moment to close on our work together. So we will also be sending out to you an inquiry about your time between now and basically June 30th to have that conversation, so please stand by. You had a
Is
question.
that like I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but is that a retreat?
Yes.
Is it just board, or are we inviting?
This would be just for the 7 of us who are currently serving to just to sort of like reconnect as we have done in the past, just to sort of, talk about our governance practices for the year and highlight things that we think, warrant further discussion in terms of all that fun stuff. So it's going to be a retreaty summer because looking ahead, we will, as we enter into the new term, also be talking about are we able to talk about the fact that we are talking about having the board and the district come together in the new term for us to attend the administrative team's retreat for a portion of that time over the summer to really kick off a collaboration on visioning and goal setting for the coming year, and to also sort of talk about how we can best work together to move things forward for the district. So that is going to be very exciting and fun.
We have those dates confirmed very recently, so I'll get that in the weekly tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if you're able to pencil in, I'm not sure yet which of the dates, but actually we can work around whatever the board's available.
Right, so it's a little bit of I think the goal is to try to make sure as many of us as possible. Obviously, summer people are traveling, and their retreat date does have to be set because they don't do it at the district office. So they're going to go outside. Yep, they have to get out of their offices. Exactly.
So for the weekly tomorrow.
Yep. Okay, great. Allison, you had a question, sorry.
Just two quick questions about the interview and application process. Did all the students who apply, will they all be invited to interview?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Our plan is to interview all the candidates.
And
so
only in person?
I think for the most part, unless someone has an availability issue or is not able to do it in person, then we would set up a Google Meet, right?
Sure. Laura, I do have a question for you, because I don't think that this has ever happened before, but like you would have students meeting with 2 board members without faculty there. Would you want?
It's a good question. Maybe it could just be, in theory, we could get parental consent if we felt like we needed it.
I think we should.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's certainly, I think we were planning to conduct the meetings here at the high school.
Yeah, I think we could do
And
that,
probably
and that
in a
makes
classroom or the faculty room or someplace that's a comfortable space. But we can connect about whatever we need to do logistically to make sure that that's comfortable.
And then that way, maybe if parental consent is given, then they would be knowing that there wouldn't be a faculty member.
Or maybe even like the rotunda, somewhere very public.
I think you'd rather get the consent than have it.
No, absolutely, but I'm saying even with that.
Well,
somewhere-
so one of the things that we're trying to do as part of this process is, of course, I think that there are students who have applied, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have like a private conversation without sort of, because the rotunda is like a very public place.
Oh, right.
So even if it's after school hours, there's folks going in and out. So I think we need to connect. If we could try as a group just to determine the timing, then Dr. Dubek and Board Development can sort of convene on ensuring that it's comfortable and covered for everybody in terms of that. But that's a good flag to raise. Thank you. That's it. I think, am I missing anything?
Nope.
Board Development? Okay, thank you guys.
Communications, we will be meeting on the 22nd at 5 p.m.
Policy?
Policy committee met on June 5th. As you can tell, we had talked about having policy 5800 on the agenda to first reading, which we did not because there were questions that came up. The policy committee asked me to speak with legal counsel to get answer to those questions that have been posed. I have spoken with council this afternoon and have reported to the committee and the superintendent that information. It's available for the next meeting of the policy committee to consider as they continue to work on policy 5800. As I reported at our meeting last week, we did not talk about educational philosophy policy 0000, nor did we talk about the artificial intelligence policy. Both of those are, as you could hear from some of the ad hoc committees that have been established, at least one of them, that is the things that the new board will pick up as part of the work that it will be doing. The committee also asked if I would provide some kind of ideas on what might be prioritized in the coming year by the policy committee as it is reconstituted or newly constituted, as well as kind of a primer on policy consideration and formulation. I will attempt to do that before June 30th, but I guess it really doesn't matter if I don't do it until after June 30th.
Logistically, would it be useful to share and get some information from the policy services group that we work with through NISBA to provide some of that primer information and information for the policy committee going forward?
There may be some things, and I can check with them, although I think a lot of what we're talking about is kind of all the stuff in my head and in my files and so on, and how that might be used as, the newly constituted committee decides how it desires to proceed in dealing with, its priorities and its mode of how it wants to operate, and things to look at and things to know, because quite frankly, and I will say that we had a discussion about this at PNW BOCES today when we met, don't always trust, and I've said this before, don't always trust NISBA policy services as the most accurate guide for what you might learn or might need to know. So there is more work that must be done beyond accepting just what they say. So, but I can actually, and I will make it a point to touch base with policy services to let them, to see if they have something that I can provide. I will add, for what it's worth, as a member of PNW BOCES board, I think, since I won't be doing this here, that I will be working on policies there. So, but it's very different.
Just when you think they're out. Pull it back in, right?
Well, no, I volunteered.
Policy data continues.
Yeah. I also just add that, subscribing to some of NISBA's best practices affords us the protections of the collective system. Subscribing to that, so.
Well, and it is a service we subscribe to, so
Absolutely.
it's always good to take
Yes.
advantage of those resources.
Can I quickly just chime in on policy, just, Neil, because I think, like the last meeting we had together, just on behalf of Theo and me as your fellow policy committee members this year, we've gotten through so much this year. We've had some very robust conversations and some arguments, and some, they've all been very constructive and productive. So thank you for steering us through so many policies this year, and just you've pushed us, you have kept us there longer than we want almost every single time.
We all said I have a hard stop at next time, and I think it's 2 minutes.
No. You definitely, if we are late, you do get your time back at the end, so you do keep us honest. We appreciate that. But I just want to say thank you, because it's been, for me, a good 2 years on the policy committee, learning a lot about policy and how we develop it and the consideration. So I really appreciate that education in policy over the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So on that note, we're going to move into polling our board. Somebody wants to start?
So, I guess I will start, because I've been thinking a lot about in the role of polling and in my role that, I guess, after this time, next time you see me, if you do, I may be at that podium, and my role will be completely different. But I just wanted to say a few observations from my years on the board. And I want to start by saying how thankful and appreciative I have been for all of those that I have worked with, the 4 superintendents, Marjorie Castro, Ed Furman, Debbie O'Connell, and Stephen Walker. Also with all of the central office and building administrators over the years, and the directors and supervisors in our various various departments, and as much with the faculty and staff and other folks who have been employed by or connected with the district, and with students. I think the thing about this role for me that is most emotionally affecting is the relationships that I've had with all of those folks and members of the community, parents and non-parents, non-parents or parents of former students, who I have worked with and I've listened to and I have responded to and I have perhaps sometimes argued with. But I think that's the part of this job, if you can call it a job, that I will miss the most. My other reflection is that I'm a member of the What Does Success Mean for Schools Committee, which I'm hoping that I will have the opportunity to continue that work as a community member, as well as on the feedback and assessment, because there we've had some very rich discussions about what those things mean. But my reflection on what does success mean in schools is our success is defined by our students and what they achieve, which is not necessarily measurable in numbers. It's not necessarily quantifiable. So for example, at the alumni event, or with high school juniors that I attended, and Sarah attended, and Anamika attended, one of the things that really impressed me was that the success that can be defined by as alumni members who spoke with us is not just those who went to prestigious universities, and not those who necessarily followed a remunerative career path. But our success was also with the students who were first-generation college students who went to WCC and came back to talk to our high school juniors as members, as alumni who were at WCC finding their pathway to move to higher education. Our success is also for someone, and I'm going to mention a person by name, Megan Giordano, who was a great athlete, softball player, who I guess had a chance probably to go to a lot of different schools, but she decided to stay here. She was a mentor for those students who were, those student athletes on the softball team, had a college career, and is now a high school coach in a school in Long Island. That is a measure of success. To me, success is someone who I saw last night who I didn't know, a student in our schools who had a lot of difficulty, went to BOCES, graduated from BOCES and from the high school, and is now an employee of our village Department of Public Works. He is a success. So are the students that we have had who we got through to the point that they received vocational training, and so that they could leave here and do as much with their lives that they are able to do. That's how we measure success. And we measure success not on what we might find in test scores, how we might compare to other districts, as I know was in the math department 3A presentation before I got here tonight. I mean, that is a measure, and it's something we should strive to. And it's something like we want to be, high up in the U.S. News and World Report numbers, because some people care about that, and it is important for, showing the health of our district. But I think everything that this board looks at and continues to look at on going forward, and for every grade, should be to ensure that every student is able to have the best possible success that that student can have in life, wherever it may take them, and it won't be seen necessarily at any particular point. We cannot tell whether somebody who took took an interdisciplinary course in high school will have been successful in that course or compared to some other course that could have been taken, but if that gave that student a spark to go into environmental work, or to go into civic engagement, or to go into the hard sciences. And we won't know that for years, but that is all a measure of our success. So that's the work that I commend the board, the district, the administration, our incoming board members, and board members who will serve years going forward to keep in mind first and foremost. Thank you.
Well, obviously, it's been a pleasure to work with both of you and Sarah, alongside you, with you, doing hard work, doing the fun things like graduation. We wish you all the best. We do hope to see you on that side of the podium. For as long as we're here, if we're doing something that you think we shouldn't be doing. And I want to wish you happy Thursday nights going forward. So we did get you guys something.
I only get 3 minutes at a time on this public.
I know.
You're gonna have to work.
I shouldn't have to work.
I didn't think that through. I might come in
That's Sarah's, tell them that. Thank you for you, for a Thursday night in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But I do want to just acknowledge your service and your commitment to students and to the district, and thank you both for your leadership.
We'll just chime in and say thank you both so much. I think, in terms of, well, as I said before for Neil, in terms of policy and his vast repository of information, I know where Neil lives, so I'll be there anytime that I have a question. And Sarah, I think just in terms of your very balanced and fair sort of direction and really your really important contributions to the district, during probably what was the roughest time for our schools, which was going through the entire COVID experience, the closure, the reentry task force. I just remember that was, for me, actually my entry point into real intimate engagement with the school district, and hearing you lead those meetings and also help sort of guide us through what was a really, really tough time. We all wouldn't be here doing the work we're doing if we hadn't gone through that. So I think our entire community is grateful for your leadership at that time. And for all of us as a board, I think you both have just done a really wonderful job of exemplifying care for students, good governance practices, and a real faith to the role and the promise of what a good board trustee can be for the community. So I really want to thank you both as well. Thank you.
Thank you. It is, I'm not going to be able to speak in the way that Neil did, but it has been an absolute pleasure to serve on this board, to serve this community. I've learned so much from so many of you sitting at this table, my board colleagues here throughout the region, and the administrators and staff and faculty that I've gotten to work alongside and learn from. It's been an incredible, incredible opportunity, and I will treasure the work that I've done here. I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do. I looked and saw, so when I was first elected to the board, my son happened to be in Patricia Lynch's classroom, and Patricia Lynch had the students during their writing practice one day right after the election go through it and write me a set of letters and wish list letters. So I'm very happy to see that many of them included turf fields. And we were able to check that off. But it was just really wonderful to think back and look at that and look at all of the work that we've done and where we've gone, and so many great things to look forward to. So thank you all.
There's one thing that I just want to add, because I was from this in my laundry list of all those in my board, is my board colleagues. My board colleagues here, my board colleagues over the years prior to the folks who are at this table tonight. I mean, I think without exception, every board member that I worked with in all the years that I was on the board, whatever their opinions were, they had the best interest of students and the community in mind. And I think from my experience, having that kind of record for that period of time is rare, and it is something that I think this community should be proud of, and this community should endeavor to keep that going for many years in the future.
Can we just stand up again?
Sure.
On behalf of the administration, this is a bittersweet moment for us, I think for all four of us. We don't know a board here without the two of you on. We feel like we've grown up here alongside the two of you. I know that I can speak for the entire administrative team in saying that we knew what we were going to get every single time we engaged with you on the topic, which was people who were smart, curious, of goodwill, and we're going to make sure that every decision was made with students at the center of it. And to us, you exemplify the finest of what Board of Education service looks like. And I think for any of us, when we give our time to something, we want to know when we're done giving that time that it's been worth it, right? That we've made the thing that we touched better. And I just want to say on behalf of the team that as you exit the board, I hope you know that you have. Right? The system is better, the student experience is better, the faculty and staff are better, and we're better for having worked with you. So, profound thank you.
We will move on to item 8.3, the next Board of Education meeting, which is scheduled for July 16th, 2026. That is our organization meeting and regular meeting. It starts at 5 p.m. at the district office.
There's a good chance we may have a special meeting before the end of the year, just to close out a little bit of business.
I am aware, yes. So we are now at the close of our meeting. The board will actually go into executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons, after which we will leave executive session and immediately adjourn the meeting. I want to wish everyone a happy graduation and a happy summer. And a safe and happy summer. And thank you all for watching and for everything you do for your students.
Can I just say thank you, Anna, for being our president this year?
Thank you. Recommended action, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby enters into executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons.
So moved.
On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. So again, we will enter into executive session, in which point we will